Well, guys, this is it. It's been a long, rough road, but we're finally here. Been recording over now for what feels like a year.
Yeah, for a
and
second.
now we finally come.
Yeah, for a second there, Mr. Wright. I thought you were just gonna quote the lyrics to Star Trek Enterprise's theme, and I was about to join in with, "But my time is finally near."
I guess that could work too. So, as we draw near the end of this playthrough that has been quite a few years in the making here, now we must steel ourselves with our final thoughts as we
Do
take
we
a look
actually
at
get to
it.
see who won the beauty pageant?
I did.
Okay. Again, do we actually get to hear that or something at least?
Yeah, I don't recall if we did. I get the feeling we don't, which kind of is a pet peeve to me.
Like, when did they even set up? It feels like all these episodes were building up to that.
I know, right? But yeah, the
Yeah, that one
chapter
back at
opens up
Layton's.
back at Layton's office.
Oh,
And we open on a shot of a teapot.
And that is how I mopped the floor with Mr. Wright.
We were on the same team, Layton.
Well then, my boy, why don't you go get some tea ready for our guests?
Right away, Professor.
Oh, by the way, Luke, don't make any for Mr. Wright. I made my own special tea for him.
Can't guarantee the taste. Man, that was one wild and crazy ride.
Which section of it?
All that drinking of water is going to be so worth it.
Definitely. Everyone back in Labyrinthia seems as plucky as ever. And holy cow, that beauty pageant.
Yeah. And by the way, Mr. Wright, here's my special tea for you. I'm sure it'll be a piece of piss for you to drink.
Hold on, let me just pour this into the flowers over there.
Curses.
Well, Mr. Wright, that's all thanks to everyone's efforts. Also, we didn't get a shot of everybody dressed up for the Bezella pageant. This game's a 0 out of 10.
I know, right?
Like, that is disgusting. Anyway, for the longest time, our town was shrouded behind a thick veil of secrecy. But now,
And it still
it's
is.
absolutely thriving.
And it still is. You get to see the pageants.
And I, too, am thriving. For the first time ever, I truly feel like myself.
What, bland?
You know,
Shut
well, now
the
that
fuck
we
up.
are...
I believe I speak for all of us when I say it is most reassuring to hear that, Speller.
Blame the writers.
Saying that,
what?
What?
doesn't it feel like one heck of a long adventure?
I mean, it's 72 parts, so yeah.
76 parts, actually.
I've lost count. Indeed. In fact, the development of this very game seems to have been quite a long adventure in and of itself. Don't mention Mr. You-Know-What.
Now we're in Crash to Insanity.
Even though he's working at your company now. The game's development, Professor.
We've just come
I
full
don't-
circle, haven't we?
I don't like to
Yeah.
talk about him. Merging together such two distinct series as Professor Layton and Ace Attorney,
Oh, come
it
on.
must have taken a considerable degree of thought and planning to get such a project off the ground.
Trust me, everyone was pretty much wondering why it took us so long to do this.
And Mr. Wright had to take extensive vocal surgery to sound like somebody else because for some reason he couldn't get his other voice.
Well, I think he had retired from Capcom at that point.
I meant your other
Oh, hey.
voice.
Clearly, they were able to get the ball rolling pretty easily, or else we wouldn't be standing here. Maya, you are so aware,
Seriously,
but so unaware at the same time.
This is a point. Sam Riegel had been voicing the character already at this point.
Well, he was just him in the in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So my guess is that they hadn't settled on him well, actually no. By the time this game was localized, around the same time Dual Destinies came out, in which Sam Riegel was Phoenix.
Yes, Level 5 and Capcom did such a good job. However, it was not quite a walk in the park to begin with. In fact, things were a bit uncomfortable at the start.
Yep. Let's go there.
Is this code for saying in a food they fucked everything up?
I guess
Aside
they're
from
trying
that.
to say without saying it.
Is that right, Professor?
Oh, I wish I could
debating
mood in a.
this.
I would mood in a
Things
food
didn't
but he works for us
exactly-
right now.
Things didn't exactly hit the ground running, huh? Professor, remember when they had us stand side by side for the first time?
Indeed. Sorry, I had to go on my knees for some reason. I must say, there was quite a bit of incongruity between the two of us, wasn't there?
It's like, I'm so tall, but without that hat, you're kinda short. Definitely. I'm pretty sure everyone more than noticed it, too.
Looks like I'm looking at your neck.
I mean, all anyone has to do is take one good look at the two of us side by side. Our character designs are pretty different.
Yeah, that's true, Mr. Wright. You and Maya both look a little, more real than we do.
And yet, in the original concept art where they changed look going to each other's universes, while Layton looks more realistic, Luke pretty much looks the same. So are they saying that Luke looks more real than Layton?
I'm not real?
No, you aren't. 3 heads taller is overkill, Maya. Although, yeah, even Maya's kind of closer to Layton's height. Shoot.
But I never noticed any sort of strange discrepancies between you all.
That's because you weren't created until we were far enough into development.
This isn't Steven Universe's speller.
They must have gone through all sorts of adjustments before the game, right?
Yeah, I had to take growth and shrinking serums.
Adjustments?
M
My
particles?
bones still hurt. This is just an aside, but there is something rather odd that I became aware of.
My
Oh,
hat is
what?
half a centimeter shorter.
I felt as if I were gradually growing taller throughout the game's development.
Yep, like me and Pedro mentioned, they definitely raised the height of Layton characters to match better
Yep.
with the Ace Attorney characters.
Remember, Hino was very adamant about letting Takumi, like, doing everything in relation, like Ace Attorney gets priority over, Ace Attorney doesn't have to adapt to Layton. Layton has to adapt to Ace Attorney.
Actually, we're gonna later figure out that the Ace Attorney characters also adapted too.
Well, they never, those Layton designs never made it into the final game, though.
You'll see what I mean.
And I totally thought to myself, is the 3D getting weird, or does the professor look shorter in this game?
She's referring to Miracle Mask.
That's a joke that's not going to work if this game ever gets ported to something, because, you know...
I wonder if they might edit the script just for this bit. But you know.
Maya, don't talk to me about my chipmunk face in that game.
Yep, here we
What?
go.
Seriously? You had a chipmunk face?
Yes, I do believe Mr. Wright himself needed a bit of height reduction for the sake of balance, Miss Faye, and since you're pretty short already.
They talk about it as though they had cosmetic surgery.
Also,
No,
if you do compare Phoenix in this game to how he is in the 3DS Ace Attorney games, they definitely were stylized to match better with the Layton characters.
I have the true story of that, unfortunately. I was eating some acorns and they got stuck in my cheeks.
It's a bit
Ugh.
scary when you think about it. Having to get used to being changed over and over. So we were made taller, you were made shorter.
It was rather painful.
Again, my bones still hurt.
Surprisingly, I adapted fine.
I have to say, though,
Yes.
the final showdown between Mr. Wright and the professor was really very impressive.
All right.
Can you even call it a showdown? I wiped the floor with him.
Okay,
You
okay.
said
well,
Go on, come on.
I'll be honest. I think they're about to get into the original showdown was going to be, but yeah, let's proceed.
Excuse me, Miss Faye? A sly fox?
It's funny, really.
You know how you told us, I'm off to go fetch some evidence for the trial, old bean, and whatever the hell that means, and left us to the trial totally unprepared.
Well, that was
You know,
your own
old-
bloody fault.
But then you kicked down the door to the courtroom like boom, and completely took over the Inquisitor's bench.
Hey, it's funny. I technically won that trial between us.
I was actually hoping I could have stepped in as Inquisitor. My Lord Inquisitor Faye sentences that burglar to my stomach. Wait.
A burglar?
For a
The
moment, you were
burger
about
to
to
my
make
stomach.
For a moment, you were about to make Maya a cannibal. Maya, do you even listen to yourself when you speak?
Now, I was just giving the players what they came to see, Miss Fay. Me giving Mr. Wright a thorough whooping, mentally
Oh,
speaking.
Please, you messed up several times.
After all, Versus isn't the game's title, if you can even call it Versus.
That's right. Nothing says versus like a dramatic courtroom battle, eh, Professor?
Well, I mean, I suppose it was still a bit better than that other thing that had Versus in it, but still.
Don't forget about the
Team puzzle.
Okay.
Oh, you're talking about that puzzle for opening the huge door in the underground ruins, right? Literally the only puzzle of its kind.
Oh yeah, the puzzle that Mick moaned on and on about until he ended up trial and erroring it, right?
Resisting urge to object. Hey.
He said the word. He said his favorite word.
I'd say that sorta got a Versus kind of vibe.
It would seem our dear developers had quite a few different ideas on how to implement the Versus in the title. Such a shame that concept was scrapped where I could have shot at you.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. Remember in the initial storyboard, we were supposed to ride on horseback.
As you can see with this concept art.
Well, aside from spelling supposed wrong, yes.
And Luke is in his last better outfit.
Prequel, yeah, prequel to outfit.
Well, specifically last better too,
Yeah.
because technically he had a different one each prequel.
That is what people commonly refer to as his prequel.
Also,
though.
Maya looks like the only one she's having. Maya looks like she's the only one having any fun.
Also,
And you're
Phoenix,
surprised by that?
how did you even get on the horse the wrong way?
The horse spun me around.
There was even a scene where the professor and Mr. Wright face off against each other in a fencing match.
Why the fuck didn't we get that?
I know, right? That would have been so cool.
Unfortunately,
this part isn't fun anymore.
standards and practices got involved.
Fencing? Oh yeah, I totally saw that too.
Remember, initially Phoenix and Layton were not exactly going to start on the best of terms.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, I was pretty surprised to see that in the storyboard.
He insulted my mother.
I don't even know your mother.
Yes, that makes it worse.
It didn't make it into the final game in the end, though, did it?
Again,
No.
that would have been so cool.
We're getting reminded of the snowman.
No, unfortunately not, Luke.
A lot.
Oh no,
God.
our funding was at least competent.
The cool evil designs are gone, the fencing was gone. Can't have things here, can we? The professor got to hack and slash those huge walking tin cans the storyteller called knights.
I see. So it's like localizing the German version of Carmageddon. We couldn't run over people, so we ran over robots.
Of course.
That, I assure you, was a special case, Miss Fay.
By the way, I've got to say, Maya, you surprised me. You're not usually the kind of person that literally leaps into action like you did when you saved a spell back in court.
I mean, you died.
I mean, Phoenix,
Not
you
bad,
do
Mom.
remember she literally latched onto Von Karma to grab that bullet and then got tasered for it. But you're definitely the kind of person that would get trapped in a steel cage of death and drop into a raging pit of fire and somehow survive.
Well, yeah. Hold it. What do you mean I don't leap into action? I can leap. Who said I can't?
Well, prove it. Leap onto the professor over there.
What?
Think fast,
No.
Professor.
What? No!
Everyone dogpile Nick.
At any rate, there are a number of fun and interesting ways for the developers to play on the versus theme of the game.
Other than actually doing it.
One suggestion was that I take you on in a game of football.
You said it. But honestly, it sounds like making this game was really tough.
Speaking of which, know what else was tough? The developers' offices. I bet they had more than their fair share of disagreements.
Yeah, we had some people arguing Mr. Wright's suit should be blue, and the other one, his suit should be green.
And then one saying his suit should be red, but then we realized we already had a lawyer for that.
I heard development on this game was so ridiculously tense. The developers ended up fighting, just like in those other Versus games.
I wouldn't be too surprised.
That implies a fist fight.
I don't know. Okay. I've seen the Iwata Asks of this game, where Iwata interviewed both Takumi and Hino. I don't know, Maya. It doesn't really seem like it.
Although, given the fact that Takumi is apparently writing these, maybe it wasn't between, Takumi or anyone, but maybe it was for some of the other divisions.
I can just imagine now Akira Hino punching Shu Takumi in the face or vice versa. The developers seem to use this opportunity to develop, let's say, a strong rivalry with one another.
Yeah, that's right. Couldn't have said it any better myself, Professor. Both were in the Versus spirit, after all. Get it? Because I'm a spirit.
It's a shame that at the time Kamiya was not working for Capcom anymore, otherwise he probably would have contributed.
Indeed, whatever contesting his fierce rivals or helping one another, it was all in the Versus spirit.
I forget if he came back to voice Goto in the anime. The Japanese version.
The important thing is that everyone did their utmost, whether friendly or competitive. I even had a drinking contest versus Mr. Wright.
Hey, Nick, if someone were crazy enough to put you in a fight against someone, what would be your finishing catchphrase?
Take that.
Was Phoenix already in the fighting game by then?
I think
yes.
in the trailer for Marvel 3, they mentioned something like in battle it's not a question of being guilty or not guilty.
You have to go with something like, it's time to pay for your crimes!
Ha ha ha, very funny. Yeah, of course.
I mean, I had to.
I mean, no one else pays him.
Might as well.
Committed the crime? It's you! No alibi, no justice, no dream, no hope!
That was still one of the greatest additions to a fighting game, just for the sake of showing that, yes, even a visual novel lawyer can make it in.
Although they kind of had to patch it up a bit, because Phoenix originally said take this instead of take that.
That was weird, yeah.
Also, it's so weird that Phoenix has been in a fighting game when Layton hasn't, and Layton is the one with actual combat experience.
I already mentioned, again, the fact that Smash had no representation whatsoever from either franchise, even in Foremost Spirits, was just weird to me. Like, neither of them were in my wish list, but goddamn, at least give the minimum to these.
Yes.
And as you know, Phoenix was definitely my most wanted, so Pain.
Plot twist, Winston Payne gets it. That's right. I speak of puzzle solving.
Enough, Professor. It's the end of the game.
Puzzles?
Enough puzzle solving, please.
Alright, I think I get what you're saying.
Have mercy, Layton.
Well then,
Oh no.
it appears our
yes.
time together is coming to an end.
Why is this so ominous?
Oh, it is? Cool. That was fast, wasn't it?
Well, I've heard Level 5 are packing up this series for a while.
Yeah, hey, fitting, because at the time, we're coming out. I hear I'll finally be back I'll be returning with 2 new lawyers in 2013.
But this is 2014. That was last
Yeah,
year.
tell me about it.
Which, yeah, that's right, I'm already back. I'm just that popular.
Mr. Wright, where are you? The officers are falling apart.
Not now, Apollo. Now stay in back and wait with Athena. Anyway,
He's
absolutely,
causing half of it.
Professor.
Actually, Apollo, haven't you moved somewhere? Now that I think about it.
We're not yet.
Let us combine our efforts one last time. And put this one final puzzle to rest.
They
All
just slap
right.
each other across the
Let's
face.
see it. Oh, sorry, I poked your eye there.
Ow! I'm sorry I poked yours.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm used to pain.
What, Winston?
And what's the final puzzle that we deal with? It's another one of
Change.
this. Yes, the Taylor puzzle.
Oh,
Alan!
because
End with a classic.
when I first saw this, I thought the puzzle was going to be like Layton and Luke are in a Layton and Phoenix are in a duel of wits. Find out which one's the most logical.
That would have been cool. Again, I get why they did a retread. A lot of the DLC puzzles are. It's just, I feel like for all that build-up, we could have maybe have had a more intricate one. Not that this one's bad, mind
I get the
you.
idea, it's because also the shape, it's in heart shape. Usually when it comes to these games similar to the Mario ones with the Champions Road, they allow to just put, the thank you letters at the end, to do this kind of stuff. So I get what they were trying to achieve.
So yeah, no, we are in fact reaching near the end of the game. I guess this is probably the closest way they could get to a literal
Again, I
thank
don't
you.
understand why they don't even mention, what actually, put an actual epilogue to what is happening in the special episodes of these one,
I do
these series
agree.
that happen. Like Barnum showed up only at the halfway point, and that's it. Like completely forgotten afterward.
To their credit, these are probably the most ambitious that the extra DLC episodes and anything Layton-wise have been. So maybe they did not plan out the story as much as it was just this random bout of hijinks to see each character.
On paper, I guess it's still better than having a clip show, because that probably would have been so easy to do it.
Oh god, yeah.
But,
no, I definitely do agree. It's disappointing we don't at least get an episode dedicated to the outcome of the beauty pageant, or getting to see everyone off before we go. Now, to their credit, I believe they did manage to get just about every character in the DLC episodes, except for Winston Payne and Olivia Al Dente. And to be fair, they never...
and Johnny Smiles, whatever it's called, the ones encountered in London.
Well, we did get Xiaomi, but yeah, other than him, yeah. Otherwise, relatively fine. And there it is.
Okay, let's give it a shot.
Ooh, ah.
No objections.
Wonderful. Quite the lovely design. The customer is sure to be pleased. Well, it's time.
Adventures filled with mysteries and excitement will always be around. You never know where they may take you. I am sure our paths will cross again, Mr. Wright, but I will hope not.
I sure hope so. Preferably in a time where things are better for me. Well, I guess this is farewell until then, Professor. Or who knows, maybe our daughters will cross over.
I get reminded of that Marvel and DC crossover where Metro and the Collector, mentioned at the end. Perhaps we should do that again someday. And it was like 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, this dialogue's automated, so...
You take care of yourself, Espella. Don't go near any bells or towers. We,
Good to see you again.
I can't wait, Maya.
Aww.
Oh, yes.
Why are you looking at me?
It's us.
We can't forget to thank you all for playing our game. You have our utmost gratitude.
I'll get it on down.
For to play my game.
I'll get it on down. Oh, wait, no, you can't now.
It
Too
was
soon.
thanks to you that true peace has come to our town.
Aww.
Even if it's just a fleeting visit, please do come back and see us all in Labyrinthia. What Aspella is trying to say is, don't be a stranger and, yeah, come back and whatever.
I know you'll be giving the game another go very, very soon.
Well, yeah, to get the secret ending.
Well, at any rate, this final special episode seems to have come to a close.
Full frontal shot of Phoenix. You really stuck it out with us through it all. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sure we're bound to meet again soon.
We'll meet again.
And don't know when, don't know when.
Remember, our adventures aren't over yet.
I hope you all had as much fun as we did. From everyone in the Layton and Ace Attorney universe, see you later.
Oh, my
That's
should be
right.
shouting, see you later!
Luke, what should Luke? Yes, about us coming back. Luke,
You
what
know-
should we tell them? Luke, what should we tell them?
We probably shouldn't let them know that this is technically, as far as they know, the last Layton game starring you and me until possibly a decade or so later, but what are the chances of that happening?
Well,
Never say never.
I need to go on holiday, so bye.
But yes, there is one thing left to do. As you recall, the game hinted that you can replay the main campaign for a second alternate ending.
I am not. This is honestly the thing that I forgot the most out of all of these post-game stuff, so I'm not even sure how much different this can be.
It's not too different, but some things are.
So,
It's because when you're in the epilogue, you can't go back, so they needed to do this for the sake of players still being able to 100% the game.
They do give you an option to either go to the final trial or essentially start, like right there. Okay, here's the first difference. Instead of Aspella, it's Darklaw giving the narration.
Layton and
Oh.
Cantabella talk
We get to
about
see how her character arc will unfold.
I do not know, and there's no need for me to know. Whatever it was, Cantabella made a promise to me and Aspella afterwards. He said he would restore everyone's memories and wrap up Labyrinthia's story. He would fight to recover from his illness and undoubtedly return to this town.
And they were yelling at him what a prick he was for saying it was incurable.
I have the utmost trust in my father's research results. What he discovered is certain to work. I know this.
Don't jinx
better
it, it
than
won't work now.
We already know it does thanks to the DLC.
And then, a new story will begin. For the town of Labyrinthia.
What I like about this is that it is sort of the other side of the coin to Aspella's ending narration,
It will be real this time, not built on deception.
whereas Aspella's is more about finally stepping into here and there. Darklaw's is about
When I
lifting the
read my
deception
father's
and
last letter,
having a better
I
life
remembered
for
his
it.
face.
We'll turn it into a tourist attraction.
That's kind of what they did.
He was smiling, like always. That's how I will forever remember him.
Aww.
Today, I learned that I have always been looked after and protected.
Quite a degree.
By Cantabella. And by my father.
Yes.
Now that I know the real cause of my father's suicide, I've decided to change.
My outfit.
This is the dawn of a new story for me as well.
Touching stuff.
And there we go.
Now, there is one other change to the ending, which, will come up later.
Wait.
But yeah.
Wait. We were filming in my study. How did we get all the way back over here?
Ghost trick, Professor. Just ghost trick.
So we had to thank, what's his name? Cece?
Thistle.
Yeah, there you go.
That is a story for another day.
Wait, you were still drinking all the tainted water, weren't you? Should you be falling over right now into the sea?
We assumed that they had enough time to purge it out of their system before we had to leave.
Thank you, Eve.
Oh God, I hope people haven't fallen asleep again.
I like how the cat stayed behind with her too. Well, that dog's just perched on the hood of a boat with no fear of falling off into the water.
Father, is this a good idea?
Thank you all so much for everything.
Right, yeah.
Bezella,
Yes, Layton?
Is this such a good idea, riding in a boat with a dog?
Be sure to visit
I don't see the problem.
You'll sit on my foot.
I wish all of you the very best.
You've not had the best of luck with dogs, Layton.
Well, animals in general.
Mr. Wright.
Speaking of animals, I love how even Hoot the Owl was flying alongside with them to see them off. Cute stuff.
Me too. I always believed in you, Professor. And I know it's why we managed to get to the mysterious truth behind this.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this was part of the original ending, but the circumstances just ended with them being on an island that caused them to have to speedboat from it. But hey, again, also to throw to you a bone once again, the last thing we see from the story is Barnum. Yep, he was there all along.
In spirit.
Like I said, the other change to the ending is upcoming, but there are some other things I do want to discuss while we're working up our way here. So yeah, as you've seen in the DLC, they do try and go out of their way to explain some of the discrepancies with the ending that were not addressed prior. Like, apparently the reason there was magic in the park was because Arthur Miller owns that place. Yep, the storyteller owned that plot of land.
That will still have to imply that Luke and Layton drank some of that water, because, they did witness some magic appearing.
Oh, that's the... Yeah.
I can't believe... Okay. One thing that also applicable to Phoenix and Maya. I can't believe in the whole, reading the dialogue, reading the diary, the book, actually, made them faint. Because as we mentioned in the explanation, the ink works on a separate level from the drinking the water and hearing the silver stuff. So I don't mind
the ink was
that.
supposed to be what hypnotized people, and it's the water that causes you to faint upon hearing silver. So my best guess would be that somebody wrote in the book, and then the beings will see themselves in the story and faint, which was probably what was written for Layton and Luke.
Well, again, you need to work on... But again, I can't believe that. But again, we get to see the witches perform stuff like shooting fireballs and everything, or disappearing, and Layton witnesses this firsthand, but he would have needed to have drunk the water, and again, just be convinced, it just doesn't hold up.
It really doesn't. I am definitely holding to my beliefs that magic was supposed to be real, especially since we were going to have bouts with Layton and Larry around. Either they were going to be representations in the story, or they were going to have come along for the venture. I'm assuming the latter is the case in that regard too. But yeah, like I've also mentioned, biggest issues are some of the spells, like even taking into account how this or that works. Goldor does not make any heckin' sense unless that wall's an illusion, which even that in and of itself is a bit of a stretch. But anyway, as we come back to here, we're finally about to see the other change in the ending.
I thought I could just finish reading a really long story.
Telling me.
Indeed, Luke. I know what you mean. It certainly was an enthralling adventure.
I wonder how
Bezella and the others back in Labyrinthia are getting on. I'd love to go back and see them. Although, I'd rather not have to be sucked into a book.
Yeah, what was up with that cutscene that the audience was seeing anyway of us getting sucked in there?
All they did was shine a bright light in our faces.
We fell over. And how did we get stuck out without anyone noticing?
Still wondering how come and they didn't even know that he escaped off a barge.
Didn't solve them all by ourselves. We couldn't have.
See, he actually died.
No.
He lived.
Cardinals we found dead in Miami.
Wow, so
Maybe-
still the only person who died was Belduke,
I suppose we could.
the alchemist.
And again, nobody faces consequences. I get the idea because the government is evil and everything, but again, still, instigation to suicide. That's a crime. I'm sorry.
To be solved, my boy.
I
Come on,
guess
No, you're
Uber
right.
would rule that technically they didn't force into it, but here's the real difference.
Hold it!
Oh.
Yep.
It's you.
He chased us all the way back to America. What the heck?
Well, thought you could get rid of me that easy.
Were you that disgraced in losing in the Lawyer Legal Olympics that you came over to America to avenge yourself?
So he's staying with his brother.
Is this the joke? Your work for 1% completion is bad. You know the character management when you like it. Too bad. You get the wisdom pay British Poland. Like.
I think that starting with this, it basically alternates each time you finish the game.
Just when we think it's all over, you always use it to turn the tables.
Ah, got it. I just have to close my eyes and say the magic word.
Yeah.
Luckily, I don't need a witch's scepter for this one.
I'm magic on my own.
This? A spell? Ooh,
Oh,
what
this I
foolishness
got
are
to
you
see.
spouting? Just take
All
a deep
right.
breath and give it all
Let
you
me show you
got.
how we do court in America
Well,
then.
Here goes.
Objection!
Yeah, he got to say it uninterrupted.
Can we go home now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
But before we go home, it's time finally to give our final thoughts on the matter.
Hooray.
Hooray.
Alright.
Who wants to go first? Gwibs.
Okay, I'll start off with the positives first. I really love the graphical look of this game. I mean, yeah, it's yes, it's amazing how they managed to get something like this on the 3DS. Yeah, without is it well? Because the other thing that's interesting because us here in the West actually had Ace Attorney Dual Destinies to compare it to when it came out because of release date differences, and Ace Attorney 5 looks still pretty good, I won't lie, especially for a first time making a game without sprites.
I wouldn't be surprised if Takumi and Yamazaki might have been trading each other notes during the development of the two games respectively.
Possibly.
Some pointers here and there.
And this game looks pretty good as well. The voice acting for the most part is solid. Although again, unlike in Japan, we actually had previous people to compare it to in terms of games with a lot of voice acting in it. And the story, for what it was going for, the actual idea of it was solid. And I enjoyed 2/3 of it, which is more than I didn't enjoy it, so I count that as a success. Anything else?
The music.
Oh yeah. In terms of the auditory department, the music is definitely the best part of the game. It's nice to hear. The Layton music is the more, for lack of a better term, unoriginal of the bunch, since that tends to use a lot more of the older Layton tracks. But hey, they're mostly from Last Spectre, so I don't care.
Which is Dwibs' favorite Layton soundtrack.
Yeah. And as for the Ace Attorney side, that tended to get the most new stuff in it. As much as the Labyrinthia objection theme can't help but sound like we have the objection theme at home, it still sounds pretty good at least. like in terms of orchestration and all that.
Also, Dibs, according to the official soundtrack booklet, technically, remember, like, all of the tracks I played during the animated scenes, those are all original, those were all done by Nishiro Sonishi. So I will argue both games have equal in terms of fan service, the old tracks, and new stuff. I will argue it's a fair balance, honestly, for both.
I'll be honest, I only really remember the tracks that play in-game, not in cutscene.
Okay.
And I think that's about it. As for the negatives, okay, I won't talk about that bit at the end yet. I said most of the voice acting was good, but there are times where some line delivery was a bit off. And Trevor White, for the most part, he's fine as Phoenix. But when it comes to the sound bites, the most famous lines, and the lines you hear the most often, he really struggles with that, especially objection.
It's weird, too, because we have seen that these companies are willing to do multiple takes. Like, keep in mind, Ben Judd's iconic objection voice, that apparently took a lot of takes, but when he got it, holy cow, he nailed the objection, hold it, and the take that. To the point where some people were probably, well, actually, no, I know for certain, some people were wondering if they were just going to replicate his voice clips for the 3DS games when it came to that, before they knew that they were getting new voice actors for the bout.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really inconsistent if they did it that way. So, but yeah, it's really unfortunate that it's like what Jovah said earlier. Objections are where you're supposed to sound the most confident and bombastic, and that was anything but.
And the weird thing with Trevor White is, he's not consistently bad. Don't get me wrong, he is not my favorite Phoenix voice actor by a mile, but there are times where he actually does sound pretty good, which just makes the parts where he sounds bad, baffling, and just annoying.
I'll hold off on properly ranking Phoenix Wright voice actors, as I haven't heard the one from the anime yet. But
not to mention, we've seen him do Zip, aka they had a broadleaf. The guy that I used to have a picture of on Discord, even like for Ni no Kuni 2, and he's great in that role. So it's not like he's a bad actor or anything. I honestly have to wonder what happened with the direction, actually.
Yeah, that's my speculation. I was gonna mention that also in my final thoughts, but that's the biggest thing that I can think of right now, because even other characters, not just Phoenix, like Tira, when she's supposed to go in the rant with the motor mouth, you can tell by the character's expression when she's supposed to scream her line, but instead the voice actress gives almost a quiet delivery. So it feels to me like the voice actors did not add so much visual reference, which is a thing of how things get dubbed in my country, for example. I know a thing.
I'm guessing they weren't given everything they needed, which is interesting because around here in Britain, the voice actress for Kira mainly does BBC trailers around here.
Honestly, if you ask me, I feel like Kira's bout works better because, yes, the text suggests that, but what she's going on is more the ranting thing, which does
I was
work.
talking about the facial expression of a character, not just the text.
Oh, you were talking about the facial expression. That's just something more in the developer and animators, because I feel like the voice actor did the job just fine for that bout, as opposed to Trevor White, who, again, he is so off and on, and sometimes just downright narmy in that regard. But back to you, Dwibs.
But yeah, Maya sounds fine. Again, that's okay. I haven't heard a whole lot of Abby Trott as Maya, and I haven't heard anything from the anime version of her.
Abby Trott actually kind of sounded so similar to this Maya that a lot of people thought the voice actor from this game came back for Ace Attorney 6. I think she's good, but I'll let you judge for yourself when we get to that game.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. Well, Layton and thank God they got UK Luke for this one. But wait a minute, what is this?
Yes, what is this indeed? Just a little something I'm booting up here.
Probably not see for a very long time because Jovah is waiting for the HD collection.
But Mr. Wright, we're not ready yet.
We'll be ready when I say we're ready. Now just get into place.
But yeah, as I was saying, Layton sounds as good as he always does, and again, I'm really glad they got UK Luke. And hey, America finally gets to find out who's the better one of the two. Again, nothing against Manny Manila. It's just, well, again, if I put it this way, if I were one of those British test players who was test playing Curious Village, I would have given the same reaction as the majority did. As for the, I won't comment on Edgeworth since he only has like 5 lines.
And they use the same voice actor of Barnum anyway, without any inflation in the voice.
I think he did a pretty decent job for like.
Although again,
I would say his Edgeworth is fine. It's just you can so obviously tell that's Barnum's. Like,
actually, I don't know this one because I haven't played those games. Who does he get voiced by in the
Kyle Herbert
games? Huh.
The narrator of Dragon Ball Z.
Voiced by Ryu.
And
that, yeah.
From Street Fighter.
Yep.
But yeah, funnily enough, yeah, it's weird that they gave Edgeworth a distinct British accent. I think Pros D put it best. Edgeworth sounds like he wants to be British, but he's definitely not. At best, it's mid-Atlantic accent.
As for the new characters we get in this game, everyone sounds perfectly fine. So new characters. I actually did. Funny enough, some of my favourite characters are more of the side ones. Like Patty and Barnum. I mean, he became a side character by the end anyway. Well, okay, I can't see the storyteller, actually. Okay, I'm sure there's some more I actually did like, but they are coming to mind right now. So Espella. She's blonde. She's nice. She likes repeating things a lot, even more so than Kira that one time. Yeah, but my big problem with Espella is that for a character whose entire plot it revolves around, she's not really all that interesting. Like, I mean, okay, like if you're gonna give me a choice between centering a plot around the character who's nice and centering a plot around the character who's, say, a tsundere, I much prefer the first one. But you still got to put some more layers on it, and that's really the only. Nice is really the only thing Espella has when she's not constantly repeating the same thing over and over again. And that got on my nerves after a while. Speaking of Barnum. I actually do really kind of feel sorry for the guy. I really get the feeling that he was it's like his character arc just stopped and never got resolved. Like he was starting to be on one, but then he got chucked in the dungeon, and then we never saw him till like the very end cutscene. It's a good job. It's a good job we saw him at that ending cutscene. Otherwise, I would have felt he would have starved to death in that cell. He doesn't even come out to see Labyrinthia unveiled, like he's still in the dungeon.
Like he gets thrown into jail, and then the next time we see him, he's being terrible at talking to women, and it's just embarrassing.
Like I said, it feels odd that they didn't bother to have it something like, again, yes, still in a cage, but it's present still among the crowd, the soundtrack and everything.
It's like I said, the typical formula for Ace Attorney is you get your tutorial prosecutor, then you get the main prosecutor, then come the final trial, the main prosecutor gets replaced by this new, bigger and badder prosecutor, but said main prosecutor does come back in some shape or form during the trial, or in Goto's case, takes over the latter half of the final trial. Again, all the same, they weirdly averted this with Barnum. Now look, in Apollo Justice, I get why they averted it. There was really no big call for there being some super secret prosecutor. Granted, I would have done a certain thing, but that's Apollo Justice. Regardless, I get why it didn't occur there, But here it felt like they were hinting. We would at least get to see Barnum pull something off, or even get a shot back to him. Like I said, what we get essentially is that the flashback to Barnum is what ends up pinning Darklaw as a suspect, so I guess that was their way of throwing the guy a bone. It really just seemed like something got changed at the last minute.
Also, in spite of what we found out in the final chapter of the game, I still stand by what I've been saying for the past bit, and I even said to Jovah privately, I still think the storyteller was a bit of a twat.
Oh, dick delivery on the whole. I have an incurable disease. Oh wait, no, I don't. Bout.
I mean, you could have just said I've been ill for a while, but there is a cure for it now. I just need to go away for a while. But no, you lead them on a pretty dark and terrifying path when you say it's incurable.
Like seriously, you've been waiting there for the longest time. I can't believe it's real.
Like that's an issue that could have been so easily solved.
And speaking of issues that could have been easily solved, the start of this whole mess.
No. Remember, like I said, if Layton and Luke had just asked the storyteller, why did you make your daughter Bezella? That would have been Darklaw's plan up in smoke, no pun intended.
Like, not even halfway through the game.
Well, not even just that. Before the game even started, like, hey, the game doesn't mention it, so I'm still gonna question it. What the fuck was wrong with therapy?
Or knocking down the bell tower.
Yeah. I mean, hell, those are perfectly logical questions for a player to ask, and the game doesn't even attempt to try and cover those tracks. So I'm gonna bring it up.
Don't you see, Dribs? We thought it better to cover the bell tower with a giant, pure black-esque tarp, which, yes, is technically scientifically possible, but somehow telling people not to see the color black makes stuff invisible, and they never knock into the stuff.
Not to mention the going about it completely, a needlessly complicated route. I've heard also, in terms of, okay. As much as I think, since Takumi was the lead writer of this game, me personally, I don't really have a preference in terms of Ace Attorney writers for either Takumi or Yamazaki. They both have their own strengths and they both have their own weaknesses. That being said, and again, I don't mean this as any ill will towards anybody. But but after hearing, but again, people have their opinions on stuff. But people that didn't like Dual Destinies clowning on Yamazaki and saying that Takumi was like the best writer, and then the next year, this game's plot ended up turning out. I couldn't help but secretly feel a sense of not.
There's a problem. There's a Go on.
I would say entitlement, but vindication to say that yes, Takumi is just as capable of messing up stuff as Yamazaki. No writer is perfect, but just as long as they can improve from that later on, it should be fine. Just as long as the fandom doesn't just descend into flat out creator worship overload.
The thing is, you're always going to have some fans like that in any fan base do this or that.
It's just really sad when it gets to your own.
Oh yeah, that doesn't change the fact that it's a bad thing.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
As for me and my thoughts on the ending, some bits that I felt when I first played this game initially have faded, others have grown. Coming across this, Layton being more of a star in the ending than Phoenix is, while it's not quite basically turning into the Layton show featuring the Jester Phoenix Wright, it's still, I think it's still a bit too lopsided in favoring Layton over Phoenix.
It's basically about It's basically about any fears that one might have had about Layton overshadowing Phoenix, even in the courtroom sequences from the Firewitch trial, are fully realized in this chapter, essentially. With Layton pretty much having all the answers, taking charge of stuff, and again, kind of making the whole Vorse is a bit of a glorified title thing. It's like I said the first time we played through this. Despite Phoenix being the winner of his trial, it was, as Tio put it, feeling like a Pyrrhic victory in that sense.
Yeah, which is interesting because I'd have thought it'd have been the other way around, considering Takumi wrote it. I'd have thought he'd have had, his creation be more the thing. That's so weird. A crossover, and the creator favors the character he didn't even create.
If I may, one thing we have to remember, while Takumi was the final story writer on this, he did still have input from Hino. Hino is credited as one of the people involved in the story-making process.
Oh yeah, that's another thing as well. Another unfortunate thing about this game is that Ace Attorney fans coming in who didn't really like Professor Layton because they felt the Layton series is nothing but a bunch of crazy, wacky twists that make no sense. And then this game comes along and just proves those people right is doubly frustrating.
See, okay, okay. So here's the thing. This is my attempt at trying to make some sense out of this. So bear with me. One thing we also have to remember is that before this game, Takumi was noticeably, as demonstrated by Ace Attorney 4, kinda out Ace Attorney'd. Like we've talked about how, like him working on Ace Attorney 4 and having to deal with mandates from Capcom, and not to mention the fact that originally in his mind, Trials and Tribulations was meant to be the end, and he didn't really want. After that game, he wanted to move on. So I get the feeling, again, this is just my theory. I get the feeling him working on Ace Attorney for this game, but at the same time being able to write other non-Ace Attorney characters like Layton was something that was a big breath of fresh air for him, and I get the feeling he got a bit over-enthusiastic about it. But that's just me.
From the later research I've gotten, it seems that the deal with Ace Attorney 4 was that he wasn't so much sick of Ace Attorney. What was the major problem was that he was forced to give Phoenix a huge role in the game, where clearly Phoenix wasn't originally supposed to be there. You see that in how pretty much almost none of the characters in that game are returning from the original trilogy, which makes it seem like all of Phoenix's friends have up and abandoned him in a very dark time of need. Granted, they do throw in that little bit about Maya sending him the Silver Samurai videos, which does imply that they are keeping in touch, but So, to Takumi's credit, it doesn't seem like he was burnt out with Ace Attorney. That being said, Ace Attorney 4 was not the game he wanted to make, as it were. I do feel like nowadays he has thankfully gotten out of that state of mind, if Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is anything to go by, so again, here's hoping for the best of the man, but I can see a potential thing with Pedro's Fury that, whereas with this crossover, he was definitely excited at the prospect of working with something new.
Remember the witch trial thing? That was his idea.
Yes, and I'll talk more about this in my final thoughts here.
But yeah, in that respect, it's just unfortunate that that a crossover like this might have ended up potentially fueling fandom fire even more in quite a few respects.
This does sound like it was caught up in the mid-2010s mentality where stuff like the caustic critic or being overtly negative on stuff here, not to mention the fact that Capcom had their own fair share of reasons to critique it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, while there are still some purists, the fan base seems to have overall mellowed on their negative feelings of a newer game. Sure, some people still do think that the newer games, while fine, don't hold up to the originals, but nowadays it seems like no one's really going out of their way to be as mean and childish as they were back then. Yeah. But I can definitely see it being a case back then because, yeah, the 2010s were quite a time. Back then, it felt, it didn't necessarily feel more natural. It's just back then it was definitely more a thing of accentuating the negative, whereas nowadays people are thankfully more, I'd say, mellowed out on stuff.
Me personally, and I say this as someone who I admittedly have been guilty of this myself, as seen on earlier commentaries. I'm glad at least we're getting past the era where we're just resorting to insulting the creator of a piece of media you don't like is getting phased out and called out whenever someone tries to do that. Like, unfortunately, it can still sometimes rear its ugly head. See Doctor Who.
Oh.
Yeah, dislike a guy's material all you want, but to resort to insults and calling him childish names, that says more about you than anything else. But yeah, that's my those are my unless there's anything I've missed.
Well, I know it's a bit, not necessarily a long-term question, but relatively meaningless considering anything, but just for the sake of, getting this out of the way, what's your favorite trial?
My favorite trial, I'd say the one in the English court.
Really? Huh.
Now, I am not one to say that, the first trial in the game's the best one. That speaks horribly of the other ones. No, that's not it at all. In fact, my second favorite case is still the
Golden Court.
Yeah, the Golden Court one. Yeah, which basically throws a complete wrench into things, and Phoenix has to suddenly solve everything without Layton.
Like, keep in mind when you think about
pretty well.
When you think about it, Golden Courtroom is like the second time in Ace Attorney bouts where the victim is actually a close friend of ours. Like, the first time that ever happened was with Turnabout Sisters, and I don't... unless we're counting the stolen Turnabout, but that was just Maya getting robbed instead of being killed.
You're done, Van Dweebs, I guess?
I'm done. I am looking forward to when we get to the rest of the games from both series. Ones that are either a bit older that we haven't covered yet, or in one case, in particular, a brand new one, which will be coming out whenever.
Shiro?
I would say it's a positive experience for the most part, despite everything that was missing that would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The game looks great. The soundtrack is amazing. It's a series, it's two series whose music we all really like, and I have been listening to the soundtrack in between the recording of this commentary. So, yeah, great music, great visuals. The characters, okay. There's nothing wrong with a character just being the nice person. But I feel like having them be a central character is a bad move.
Don't make your characters likable.
I'm referring to as...
Don't make your characters likable. Make them complex. Lead writer of Avatar: The Last Airbender. His name is a bit hard to pronounce, so excuse me. Go on.
Is that Andrew Zayas, I believe?
I don't really know how to pronounce his last name. Go on, John.
No, it's fine. She's fine, but as a central character, no, she's not very interesting, and it's kind of hard to care about her all that much. Like, she has enough character for a side character, but not a main character.
Let me just add something, Shiroi. Sorry, I thought you were done describing.
No, I'm done with that part anyway.
See, I want to add at the very least, because that quote sometimes gets a bit misconstrued by people on the internet that I've seen. When Aaron says, don't make your characters likable, make them complex, what he means, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't make your characters likable. That's not what it means. What he means is, it should prioritize the complexity of the character over likability. That's what he means. Because a character can be both likable and complex. However, likable is not enough. That's what he means when he says that.
I think the thing with Espella is she does have layers to her. The problem is that by the time you do get to those layers, we're near the halfway point of the game, and those layers do consist to what comes off as a bit of repetition. Now, I'm more tolerable of it, and like Tio and Shiroi did point out, there is a point to that repetition of it being a mental conditioning of sorts. Again, the issue is how much the player is willing to put up with it, given how, by that point of the game, Espella does not come off as really that helpful or useful, sadly.
A good example that I can...
Which is a shame, because she's much more helpful in the first half of the game, honestly.
A good example that I can think of is DBZ's Bardock, who was never particularly properly fleshed out in the manga until years later, but the anime team took it upon themselves to make an OVA exploring a backstory for him that they came up with themselves, and it's one of the most beloved pieces of DBZ media, because it's really good, and it has a really good, strong theme of its story. But then when Toriyama, the creator, decided to have his own take on the character, he produced something that was far less interesting by just making him anime Jor-El, and he's super nice and everything, and most people, including myself, didn't particularly care much for it, and far preferred the anime take because it's far more interesting. Yeah, he's nicer, but that's the thing. Nice in itself doesn't make a character. Go on, Shiri.
I like her design. That's nice. And I feel like one thing that would have been much better for me, and I didn't realize this until we got to the last case, because that's only really where it starts to show up. I feel like Espella would have been a lot more interesting if the story actually explored like the relationships between Espella, Eve, and her father a lot more. Because it's also hard to take the relationship between Espella and Eve seriously as childhood friends when it's not something we really get a glimpse of much at all in the game. And I know a lot of that comes from the memory loss thing, but we don't even get some snippets of memories, because Espella is obviously recalling some things. But I don't know. It just would have been better if we got to explore that a lot more.
So would you say it's more so the relationship with her dad you wish we'd explored?
No, the three of them.
No, I think...
Because both families were very close.
Yeah.
They do not showcase that enough at all.
The only bits we see...
The main issue with that is, like, well, the main problem with that is that is saved as, like, big twist material, so unfortunately, as a result, it only shows up near the end, and, well, given
I feel
all the
like
stuff
that's a bit of a
happening
detriment between the character dynamic, personally.
I agree, and honestly, I feel like there could have been a way that we could have revealed that without spoiling the major twist.
I have a suggestion for that, actually. They could have done something akin to Ni no Kuni 1, where the identity of Shadar is kept secret, right? But then when it's revealed, we cut to a big, like, 5-minute flashback that basically sums up his life when he was just a normal person, and we get a full understanding of things. So his backstory was kept secret until the twist, but then when we do, the thing is, this game doesn't really do that. This game doesn't really cut to a little flashback montage of how they were when they were little girls. Playing together and all that shit. They could have done something like that, but they didn't.
Yeah, and again, not even some foreshadowing in Espella's memories, because again, she is like having some flashbacks sprinkled out throughout the game.
Given how one of the original drafts of the story did call for Eve the cat to just be a hallucination, I wonder if in that draft we were going to get much more hintings towards, the actual human Eve in that regard.
I imagine so.
Like, again, I'm not going to say that all the story problems are caused by that, but I really do feel like a bulk of these problems were with the fact that the story had to be heavily rewritten because of went down with Inafune, essentially. Because just look at all the stuff that was cut, misplaced, or just done away with, and it's like, no, there's definitely a big catalyst. And we do know that the bit with Inafune did cause Capcom to nearly all just pull out of the project.
Yeah.
being how they can be in that regard.
Apparently, Capcom executives didn't particularly care about this project.
I swear, Capcom can be frustrating, but I'm not going to go into a rant about that.
Yeah, this is early 2010s Capcom, so I can definitely see that being a thing. Go on, Shuri.
Yeah.
This game is pretty much the epitome of wasted potential. It was like what we could have had. It's like
the only bigger case that I can think of compared to this would be the first Epic Key.
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard that game's a treasure trove. Also, Crash to Insanity.
To an extent.
And again, Crash to Insanity.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one of the main reasons why I want a sequel to the crossover. Like, now, I want to see another crossover, but this one that can fully realize the potential of crossing over these series. Not to say that this game didn't do a good job. We had a lot to compliment on our course of it, especially on our second run, the stuff that we noticed, but it really does remain. There could have been so much more done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For characters I do like, Jean. Bonnet.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's the? We literally just spoke to her. What's the librarian's name?
Riddell.
Riddell, thank you. Aunt Patty. There's a lot of great side characters, and favorite case. I don't mind Amir, actually. He's a pain in the ass, but I don't know.
Well, that's the idea.
These are pain in the ass.
Again, it's like I keep saying, annoying characters can work if we care about the characters being annoyed. You see, the reason Jar Jar Binks gets so much flack, aside from being racist, is the fact that because the characters in Phantom Menace are so bland in their characterization, Jar Jar comes to a point where he only annoys us. But when it's Ymir doing it, the reason Ymir, first of all, the writing is much better for Ymir. That's another thing as well. But we care about Phoenix, we care about Layton, we care about Luke. Therefore, we find it kind of amusing when they get annoyed. That's kind of how this kind of writing usually works. Annoying characters work if we like the characters being annoyed. If we don't, then all the comic relief does is annoy us, the audience. But Ymir works. Go on.
I mean, I think it works better for the fact of the catharsis more than that, Pedro, but...
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing, too.
Well, I'm talking about the characters, what's the term? Theoretically, via words, beating the shit out of him, not necessarily them being annoyed by him.
Well, that's another way you can do it, yes. But there are multiple ways of achieving things.
Favorite case, the one where Layton's hand is sold for money.
Golden Turnabout, yeah.
The Golden Court, yeah.
There's actually a joke that Jovah did not manage to trigger. Basically, when Emir is being asked about specifically the fact that he sold the hand, Phoenix can actually ask for how much. And apparently the response is that there's a general pause, and then Emir asks if Phoenix wanted to sell himself, and everyone starts laughing at him. So there's that.
Was that possibly a joke that only shows up? Wait, did you see this in the English dub too?
No, TV Tropes included that.
Oh, weird.
You didn't press one of the statements, Jovah. There's that.
So it's complete. It's like an optional.
Yeah.
That feels like something that I would
penalized for that.
That feels like something that I would have included if I knew about it.
No, it was one of the cases where when you actually press, there are multiple choices and you went immediately to the correct one.
Oh, right. That may have been one of those things I did to save on time, since that may have been getting to be a lengthy bit.
I originally, when we did this, I remember saying, when we originally recorded this, I remembered saying that the last case ruined the rest of the game for me. Because it's very much one whole connected story, whereas with regular Ace Attorney, there is that, but it's more so stuff is connected in the background rather than everything that's in the forefront, and all the background stuff just comes out in the last case or two. But I do feel very differently about that now because, like, I don't think it takes away from the rest of the game for me. Yes, it's a slog to sit through. It's like several hours, but it's also like not even half the game, and the rest of it I pretty much only have praise for, like almost the entirety of the time.
It's like how I've come to the conclusion that, yes, I do still consider that the worst thing Ace Attorney has done, but it feels so bizarre and disconnected from everything that I can't help but just disassociate it with most of the game's journey because that more or less does not click with anything. So in a sense, it does not ruin the game for me because it feels like it's in its own little world more than anything.
The concept designs and the final designs are all also very good, though it would have been great to see some of them actually in the final game. The voice acting, great on the Layton side of things. On the Ace Attorney side of things, everyone just doesn't sound all that enthused for a lot of it.
So you're referring to Maya, Phoenix, and Edgeworth, I guess.
Yeah, though Edgeworth gets a pass because he was there for all of, like, a few minutes, so...
Paycheck.
Yeah. It's not like, you know, if it was the final... if we got what we were supposed to and Edgeworth was here all the time and sounded like that, then I would have a problem, but no, it's like...
I'm guessing the fact he's only there for a short time is why they pretty much doubled him with Mark Healy, Barnum's voice actor.
It's like, guys, emote, where is it? Come on. Everyone just sounds like they're having an ordinary daily conversation, and like, come on, guys. Even when they see people being burnt alive, or you know, at that time supposedly burnt alive. I feel like both these series would have come off a lot better if magic was a thing that existed.
Yes!
It's just so much easier than the explanation they actually gave us.
It really is. Like, look, I've always had this feeling about Layton, but it is definitely one of the most prominent cases in this game here where, no, just let it be magic. You can still have mysteries, and there be magic, as literally cases 2 and 3 of the game did show.
I know being a spirit medium and being a magician are not the same things, but for the love of God, you can get away with it. Just do it, please. I'm begging.
Which is interesting because when Hino tried to make things simpler with Lady Layton era, where the mysteries are much more simple and much less bombastic in their explanations and shit, people wanted a return to the original trilogy stuff. So it's...
Well, what do you want from me?
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb and think that while they may have wanted some more complicated stuff, that didn't necessarily mean they want, oh, magic doesn't exist and here's a needlessly complex reason why. Again, I haven't played the game in full, but my best guess would be they want more elaborate plots. Not necessarily nonsensical twists, though. It's just my 2 cents.
But yeah, I think I've covered everything about this game. It's a shame that we didn't get what we were meant to. It was still perfectly enjoyable, even though the final case was just bleh. And it's probably never going to happen, but it would be nice to, in some sort of timeline, to have this, to have them try again.
I wouldn't say it's impossible, seeing as how both Phoenix and Layton have effectively come out of retirement in regards to being the main series.
Yeah, I never thought we'd get a new Layton game again, and yet here we are. So
yeah. And I tell you there, like, well, before this crossover, a lot of people never thought Phoenix would be back as the main character of the series, but, well, he came back with Dual Destinies, and, hey, we know Ace Attorney 7 has to eventually be a thing. Please, Capcom.
Like I said before, like I said in our Level 5 Vision commentary, Shiroi, Hino will never allow Layton to die. He loves that franchise way too much. Remember, he said various times, it's his baby.
He just occasionally needs a break.
It's not so much that he needed a break, sure. It's more so that he needed to reevaluate things and see how he could move forward. I'm pretty confident the return was always in the cards.
Well, again, from what I understand, Lady Layton was originally supposed to be what was going to be the Layton series successor from that point, but
well, yeah, the idea was
changed, and
well, yeah,
now we're back with Layton and Luke.
That's what I said. He had to go back to the drawing board, but I'm pretty confident the idea of never making more Layton games was never at all in the cards. I'm pretty confident Hino would that would be the most heartbreaking thing for Hino, most likely, considering how much he loves making these games. Go on.
All right, but yeah, that's it.
All right then, Tio.
Yeah, I guess I better go next on this. I don't actively hate it, actually. If anything, I actually appreciate it more since the last time we did this. And honestly, don't even think it's the worst that has happened to either franchises. The flaws are there, and I will get that in a second. But honestly, as a wild ride, it is present. I'm not sure how to communicate it properly, but one thing that I always noted, since also, as Jovah pointed out, the 3DS eShop is going to be closed down by the time this is public. There was a sort of a charming quality to 3DS games of big companies, particularly obviously Nintendo stuff, but even third parties, that had, even if it was a very bad experience, like say Chibi Robo Whiplash, there was at least a minimal part of enjoyment that the player would have, some kind of fashion. So it never felt like you had wasted completely your money. Maybe the most egregious case would be Paper Mario Sticker Star, but that felt more like the exception more than the rule. Even in stuff that could have turned out maybe disappointing or, just potentially outright bad, you never felt, you had felt always some sort of sense of enjoyment out of it, of the experience that you faced. And I think this fits the category as well. The character designs, I actually no complaints here. I would have loved to see the characters changing aspects in order to reflect the passage between worlds, and it would have certainly helped better define the idea that these two franchises live in separate realities. Because again, when you make a crossover that it's not about a character visiting another in another universe, instead want to pretend that both exist, you have to start thinking also on the bigger picture, and considering the amount of time Phoenix has been, in different stuff that involved, huge crises all over the world. If you want to pretend that it's also in the same universe as Layton, it's a castle of cards that starts crumbling about it.
It's like with Marvel vs. Capcom, which implies that all the Capcom games take place in the same universe.
Like I said, Project Cross Zone found an interesting way to combine these things by having the more quote-unquote realistic type of franchises like Resident Evil and the fighting games happen on the universe, while the more outlandish stuff like God Eater and Mega Man will happen either in a separate universe altogether or in the distant future. Again, there's a methodology into how to make a crossover work without raising too many questions, and unfortunately this one works only halfway there. But like I said, I would have loved to see also the characters changing appearance, not necessarily for Phoenix and Maya being chibi. Like Pedro noted, it's a valiant attempt, but there's something not quite there. But goddamn, I would have paid anything to see handsome Layton in action. I'm not gonna lie.
I know! Like, seriously, Layton looks so gorgeous in the anime, Ace Attorney style. And again, like I said, Luke relatively looks the same, so are they implying that Luke looks more realistic than Layton?
Possibly. Maybe they do operate on the rule that Pedro suggested about having the character with the dot eyes are the more, cartoony ones. Although these does create a couple of weird moments, as I noticed. During the animated cutscene where Kira bombs the shit out of the market, we get this awkward shot of Phoenix standing to a clearly Layton-esque character, Layton Universe type of character, and it's so jarring seeing both of them in the same frame.
Come to think of it, did we ever figure out why Kira nearly killed Phoenix and Luke with that bomb?
I thought the idea was that Darklo thought the Phoenix was too much of a nuisance and wanted him to be rid of.
That probably would be. That probably would be.
The game sure as hell never tells.
True, yeah.
But that's for the character's appearance. Even the original ones, I have nothing to complain. Everything is so detailed. If anything, like I said at the beginning, I kind of prefer this look of and color palette of Layton over the ones where he got in his own 3DS games. Not that it's necessarily bad in those, but the color palette here feels more warm and welcoming, for lack of a better term. It's just more pleasant to the eye to me. The mixes of brown and everything, the lighting on it.
Since we're talking about character designs, who ended up being your favorite original character for this game?
In terms of appearance, you mean? Because personality is another case. So, like, if you
go
want
with appearance first.
Well, appearance, I guess the storyteller. Again, because nothing wrong even with the other designs. Dark. Everything is clearly European medieval inspired. With both the armors, the more clothing type for stuff like Dark Claw, or even Newton Beldu, the Alchemist, Jean Grey, even some of the concepts that are explored. So there's nothing to complain on that front. All the 50+ people who did the art department did a fantastic job, no matter how much stuff actually got cut away. But when we got in the final product, like I said, it's pleasing to the eye, which is one of the more important parts of the game. If it also did not look the part, which could have easily slipped into the Uncanny Valley more and more if they did not being careful, this would have made the process even more, potentially slogging for other people. So I'm glad that he actually did not went there. Already, same goes for the soundtrack. Everything. I don't really think there's a single bad track in this entire game. I'm not sure if I want to call it the best of either franchises, but it's pretty much up there. Like I said, there's a bit of a lack of the accordion. It is present, but it's for a Layton, something of Layton, it's shockingly reserved on the front.
I get the feeling
the more bombastic of the orchestra, which is fine by me, but
I wonder if Nishihara wanted to go for something
Yeah.
a bit different.
I was about to say
symbolize
that
this being
too.
A much more different venture.
Not to mention, remember, unlike what happens with the Layton series, this game was directed by Takumi. It meant Takumi was the one who gave him instructions on what kind of music he wanted instead of Hino. So maybe Takumi has different preferences regarding what music to use.
Still, there are some great themes, like we mentioned, Corner Spellbreaker, for example, the way they are paced can be a bit weird sometimes. Like, in a lot of sequences where you don't really feel it, we get Layton's main theme, which, when it comes to, in some cases, when it's centered around Phoenix having to ponder about in the trial, just feels a bit out of nowhere, but it's more connected to the plot as a whole. But again, as a whole, the soundtrack is just great. Again, nothing to complain. The presentation is probably the biggest aspect, the strongest aspect of this game, which is a bit hampered by the 3DS. On one hand, I don't blame them, because while it's powerful on its own, it still had its limitation, and a game like this pushed it to its limits, even with a more simplistic style of gameplay, and structure. I wouldn't mind seeing these getting the HD treatment. On that note, something that I would have mentioned at the end otherwise. No, I don't think this necessarily needs the 1.22 thing that Nier got, or the Saga Frontier Remaster. While I would appreciate potentially if some of the cut content got reinstated, I get the idea, but it's a thing that just tweaking a bit could make the whole thing crash unless it's reworked heavily entirely. So if the game has to be reproposed, just simply copy-paste it and make it, look better and run smoothly, it's fine by me, so people can also enjoy it. The problem is that, again, the localization was done by Nintendo Europe, so even if it does, I am afraid it might be just a Switch exclusive, which I would prefer if it was also at least on PC, but who knows, we'll have to see.
Has Layton ever been on anything that's not Nintendo?
No,
Mobile.
No, Nintendo. Layton is.
Yeah, mobile. But to be fair, even Nintendo stuff has gotten on.
Well, yeah, true.
What I mean is that in those cases, if I recall correctly, it's either self-published by Level 5 or just a subcontractor to another company.
Let's put it this way: mobile aside, the Layton series has always been a Nintendo exclusive.
And only recently, Level 5 has dipped their toes onto the PC market, thanks to Bandai Namco encouraging them with the Ni no Kuni ports, and more recently we're getting Makoto Musashi there, so we'll have to see.
From what I understand, New World of Steam is still a Switch exclusive.
Yes.
Just a Switch exclusive.
Switch
They
exclusive.
wanted to play safe because we know the core audience of Layton is just on Nintendo anyway. So I get what they were coming from. Voice acting. Now, here is where the cracks start to show. I still maintain my idea that the voice actors did not have too much of a field of reference, because while what they say on the scripting is correct, it's even in... I tried to look up a bit of differences in the script, and localization actually stayed true for most of the time anyway this time around. They actually played nice. Like I said, the biggest problem are the inflation of the voices. A lot of times, the voice actors that are not Layton and Luke do not convey what the emotion that the visual is actually trying to represent. A character being shot will be like, what happened? You know, and that just clashes on with what's happening. Like, I'm not sure if I want to hate too much Phoenix voice actor as much as the others did in this. Sure, I prefer Sam Riegel any day when it comes to the English one, you know, but this one did at least bother to do a bit of an attempt. Like I said, it's more of a problem of direction, and I don't understand, because the direction is the same one that has happened in previous Layton games. So what happened here? And side note, I'm not bothering too much with to mentioning how the Italian dub of this is, because it's serviceable, but I could have lived without it. It's the first major case where Phoenix has many lines of dialogue, voiced properly in Italian, and the guy that they chose them is serviceable, but I could live without him.
I'm curious.
Role. Mind you, all the returning Layton characters get their actual voice actors, and as such, they were perfectly fine there.
If I may ask, how at least does his objection hold its intake? That's
like I said, serviceable, but I can live without it. Just to mention quickly, because I mentioned those also in the Ace Attorney rounds, but the terms are slightly different. Objection is the same. Hold it is translated to one moment. And what was the other one? Hang on. I think it's almost the same, but again, some terms are slightly changed for phonetic difference.
Unfortunately, a literal translation to both Portuguese and Italian would not work. A literal translation in these cases would not work.
It's more the exception still than the rule. Like I said, even for the Italian translation, for most of our they actually...
Oh, no, I get that. I get that. I'm talking about these three specific terms: objection, hold it, and hang on.
Sure.
Doing a literal translation of those three in our languages.
I know that because the cartridges that I had of the original Saturn trilogy had also the Spanish language, and in that, Phoenix, instead of saying objection, said protesto, which means to
I protest. Yep.
Let me guess. The literal translations lead to dirty euphemisms in your native languages, don't they?
Not really.
Yeah.
So what's the issue then?
No, the issue I have is with the voice acting, like I said.
Let's talk about Pedro mentioned how it wouldn't be a good idea to do a little translation.
Well, let me explain. See, in English, in courts, when the attorney wants to object, he says, "Your Honor, I object." But I can speak for Italy, but in my country, attorneys say, "Your Honor, I protest." So doing a literal translation would make Portuguese audiences feel off, like that. What? Like
I said, the advantage of being as close as we are to the original Latin is that we can adapt even to foreign languages that were not necessarily connected to ours. So even when it's not the Eurocentric fest, we still can adapt easily. Sure, there will still be differences a bit here and there, but for the most part, we do a better job without having to give compromises, like, say, an English translation would from Japanese. That's what I mean, that also where a lot of times the Italian translations tends to be more faithful. All right, let's talk about the story. Okay, I will start with the premise, and here's my first of two biggest, thing that I want to say about it. And this is a bit of language because no one has mentioned about it, and I have mentioned this to another game that we did recently, so don't worry, it's not necessarily a copycat of that, but is it just me, or this feels more like a story that should be for a second crossover rather than a first? What I mean is that have a first game being a more local kind of thing. Have a more simple one where Phoenix and Layton meet actually and they have to solve still a mystery together, but a more normal normal kind of stuff. Let's say, hypothetically, that the professor visits Phoenix, Japan, America, whatever the fuck it is, kind of is. Maybe they have a trial too. Maybe Don Paolo tries to disguise himself as, a person that gets involved as the victim, potentially in a crime like that, in order to involve more characters from each part of the crossover, and at the end of the day, while they still solve the mystery and everything, it's not as big as bombastic, despite still respecting the Layton twist canon, which I will mention later. and they depart on good part. And then this happens, where the characters would know each other, but because of being trapped in Labyrinthia, it scrambles a bit with their memories, and as such, it is why Phoenix and Layton cannot recognize each other immediately, but then as soon as they are united, remember their role properly, they start to try to figure out having more experience with each other. And again, a game with this kind of scope would justify it being, an escalation from a previous title. I get the idea with this, they try to beat more than they can chew in terms of, theming and everything. Like, it's a noble idea and not been explored yet in either franchises. But again, as we say in my country, they probably did, perform the step longer than their actual leg was,
I think I do get what you mean. It's like one of my issues with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, where, weirdly enough, the characters act like they've known each other, yet as far as we knew story-wise, that was the first time that we ever got a story acknowledged of their crossing over.
Very confused run of it. In that game, tried to operate on a mix and match kind of thing, as in, try to start where the invasion has happened a bit, but it still prefaces as a prequel to the whole Marvel vs. Capcom franchise, being the first iteration where the characters still met. But again, this is not that case, and I do believe the responsible of that is the fact that the Rushness made all the different plot lines that they had in mind, like the evil doppelgangers, completely cut off, and they had to work with what they had. Because here's the other thing. I know that we are taking the 76 part, but I think I mentioned it in one of the previous parts. But is it just me, or this game feels too short?
Yes. I've said it before, and I'll say it again.
One more big trial with a bit of exploration attached to it, because one of the biggest problems with this is that we spend so little time in Labyrinthia talking with its inhabitants. Aside from a special episode, we don't see some inhabitants on the field and talk to them. Some characters are just up and gone, even before the halfway point, and we don't even see them or interact with them ever again. And overall, it feels like there's still a lot of missing potential. And again, that's not even talking about the stuff that they did not import from either of the main series.
I swear, the first time I ever played this game, I was so certain we were going to at least get one trial in between Golden Court and the final trial. Like, again, maybe have it be Patty or some other...
The time that Phoenix and Luke spend together, before they start actually searching for Maya and Layton along with Espella, is so little, in my opinion. Like... There should have been at least also a bit more on that front. But the moment, almost right after Kira's attack, they immediately go beeline towards the courthouse, and from there they pretty much reunite with them almost immediately, because they go to the lab in the Eldritch Woods and then the ruins. And as you said, Jovah, by that point, when they return to Labyrinthia, it's already endgame time. But again, it really feels there should have been more. And again, the rushness of this is a big culprit of this. I can understand, but I'm just noticing how the game, handled this. Now, as for the new major characters introduced for the trials and such, I absolutely like Barnum as a new prosecutor. Like I said, while they have some themes similar to him, they actually bother to not making a full-on Edgeworth clone. And I really appreciate that, because they would have been so easy to do it. Same goes for Darklaw. You think they will combine a bit of Franziska and her father in one character, but no. She still has her own type of agenda and the way... If anyone noticed, she kind of sucks at her job, because almost the entirety of the final trial, she really does her job poorly in terms of, manipulating the witnesses and, wanting to avoid the Phoenix actually getting to the truth. Like, Phoenix just almost steamrolls her completely.
One thing the story does make clear is that Darklaw apparently did not expect to have Phoenix along for the journey, so I think, okay, and mind you, we still do have the issue of, supposedly Phoenix wasn't even meant to be there, but my guess is that what the story was trying to go for was that Phoenix ended up being the spanner in the works that allowed things to end as happily as they did, and for Eve's plans to be foiled, essentially. That's my best take on why she probably was not prepped to go against the literal ace attorney that Phoenix is.
But anyway, now, bizarrely enough, my least favorite trial of the entire game is the first. The British turnabout. Mind you, not necessarily because it involves the real world stuff, and if anything, it's the only case where we see the classic theme of Ace Attorney Mixed. But it arguably is the one that's being the introductory one. I think it's the more safe, and as such, doesn't really have that much grandiosity to it or enjoyment out of it. Not to mention, I'm still a bit mixed on Olivia Al Dente as a whole. Aside from the fact that translating they changed slightly her name, and honestly, not really without a very good reason for it, because her original name is Ardente, as in passioning, ardent with passion, which will have, reflect her personality and still the fact that she's a cook. Translating that with a pasta pun just feels pointless. No, don't worry, I'm not saying that it's an offensive stereotype or anything. It just really felt pointless. But
I think I can sort of also get why you might not consider the last case to be the worst, because
I'm getting there,
Sorry,
Jovah.
yeah.
I'm getting there. But case 2 and 3 are actually relatively fine. Golden Turnabout can potentially go too long, and it gets way too many surprise witnesses. And again, the less Emir would have been present, the better, because sure, it is fun actually to have Phoenix and Barnum verbally, beating the shit out of him, like I mentioned. But there's only so much you can go with, and the fact that, and again, there's also some minor elements that really feels like common sense would have dictated things should have gone in another way. Like I said, Barnum should not add such a convoluted way of thinking when it comes to the room of the alchemist being perfectly tied, and she should have gone to the lower common denominator and said the witches use a sleeping spell or something similar to that. But the reason why I don't think the fourth turnabout is the ultimate, the final trial is the worst of the game, despite its problems that I'm about to get, is as follows. The first half is just a blast. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sure,
I agree.
Espella's, the initial Espella's exorcism, for lack of a better term, can get a bit longer than it needs to, a bit overstaying its welcome. But the satisfaction of the vigilantes, all 10 in a row, having this chaotic jumbled mess, all these different colorful personalities, this fine art of simping of two of them, and the fact that Phoenix takes down all of her bullshit single-handedly, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, it's like I said, I don't agree with the idea that, the entire case as a whole is terrible. This is why nowadays I've narrowed down my bit to, it's not even the case as a whole that's the worst thing Ace Attorney has done, it's literally just the last chapter of the game.
And
last two chapters.
Let me use this also to talk about the twist. Believe it or not, I don't really have a problem with it. Sure, I guess it would be more convenient if magic actually was a thing. But honestly, as the years went by, I grew more accustomed and actually appreciating of the Layton twist. And if anything, this is perfectly respectable of what the Layton twist is, as in this twist is focused squarely, entirely around the town. The town has a bigger meaning to it. The people behind it and in charge of it have a bigger meaning to it. Layton unraveling change things, but not necessarily for the worst, but potentially for the better. And even if it's a painful kind of thing and potentially can have plot holes, it leads ultimately to a happier conclusion that the characters were before. The game does actually its job on that front. I actually don't have a problem with that. The problems,
that's a good point.
the problems, as I noticed, are the fact that there's not much to support this. If the game actually had bothered to give proper hinting, foreshadowing, and ultimate explanation on how Machiavellic these spells would have been constructed, it honestly would have fit so much better, and it would have absolutely no complaints on that. You want to know what's my real problem with Case 4, if I had to be honest? The final witch trial. And I'm talking about the last section. And I'm not talking necessarily about, like I said, just about the twist. The fact that it's still a trial and in the middle of the fucking town square. Again, I know that it's probably not a thing that the writers thought through or anything, but what the game actually presents is Layton's just barging in and forcibly and Expella confront their entire fears, all her trauma and suffering in front of the entire town, dragging her father that she believed to be dead and everything for that, just for this, because he believed that it was the only way to get her cured or at least healed in a better state. I'm sorry. On a psychological level, this is kind of bad. Like, I had already a problem when Edgeworth pulled some shit like this in Case 2-4 with Adrian Andrews. But again, what should have happened, in my opinion at least, would have been that the moment Layton arrives, he neatly ties up the trial, asks the invited people, including Phoenix, to get instead in a more secluded part, presenting also the storyteller and everything, and then starts unraveling the entirety of Vespella's backstory and including Darklaw. Because I'm sorry, again, it feels horrible for the character of Vespella being essentially, ulteriorly presented with her trauma and everything, and the game presenting is a positive manner just because she's getting better over it. Yes, I guess ultimately we got from point A to point B, but man, what a rocky ride!
It was pretty cruel.
If I may,
and again, connected also to what we said before about potentially telling about the writers. I firmly believe that this was just a thing that the writers did not thought through. They believe instead more on the spectacle more than anything. So I don't really blame them that they say they did it intentionally to be mean towards the characters, so don't worry about that. It's just that it's a thing that I guess as aged, the more we get awareness of how mental illness are represented in fictional media,
I will give them credit. I do feel like for the most part they did their best to portray the whole mental conditioning here and there, since Expella believing herself to be Bezella is a combination of brainwashing plus with the mental trauma here. In regards to Layton, I actually could see him doing this sort of thing. The reason that they had it be with the trial, though, was to get in that versus, because
just to also
that's legit the only reason I can see it. That being said, sorry.
Just to mention also for previous examples of something similar to this happening, when the ultimate truth about the events of Pandora / Diabolical Box, or even the city of Montedor in Miracle Mask did happen, all of them still happen relatively in a place relatively secluded where the main characters could talk to each other without feeling the need to be judged by the entire fucking place.
I will give this argument, though, that those were definitely about of the luck of the circumstance. One thing to keep in mind is, given the circumstances, this was apparently the way to solve the mystery and get Expella off the hook.
Leads me, and again, to add it just with what you mentioned, this also clashes with the Ace Attorney part of the crossover, because this is not even a case of, let's say, the entire town is reunited in the plaza and has to, see them just tomorrow, like the storyteller told. This is still the trial, and Expella is actually the actual defendant there. She's literally judged by the entirety of the fucking town, which wanted her dead for a very long while, and even before that, they were very judgmental towards her. And again, she's forced to face all of this. Again, it just feels horrible when you really think about it. Which leads me to the character of Expella herself. I really don't have a problem with her, at all. I honestly think that the game did exactly the job they were supposed to do with her, and the fact that she comes across potentially annoying with her over selflessness is just a byproduct of that, because I guess, like I said, the explanation of why she's acting like that is pretty logical, and it contextualizes literally everything that she did. You know, it's not like she actually decided to pester other characters to be annoying by that. If anything, the contrary. She always wanted to put herself up there in order to avoid people suffering for that, even if she had to take the blame potentially for it. Again, if anything, she's not too dissimilar from Layton himself for doing this kind of thing, if I had to be honest. So I don't really see how that actually makes her supposed to be.
I can help you with that. I can help you with that too. See, the thing is, the reason a character like Goku or Layton works is because they have the flat character arc. The flat character arc is the character arc where the character himself doesn't change, the character changes the world around him, right? Espella's niceness is cool, but she's not contributing to the character, to the development of the people around her. That's the reason why people tolerate Layton, but they don't tolerate. Well, I mean, in terms of us, obviously, that obviously outside of us, of course, that's another thing. But the point is, the reason that Goku and Layton work is because they change the world around, and they don't need to change. They're already good people. It's just that their job is to change people around them. Phoenix is also kind of like that when you get right down to it. Like, he changes the people around him. He helps people. He helps people like Adrian Andrews and shit like that. But the problem with Espella is that her contributions to the world around her are not particularly meaningful. I think that might be the reason.
Is also to the other half of what I was saying. It's not just a matter of being selfless. Her PTSD makes it pretty much clear she also has suicidal instincts. Again, it's nothing more than that. So also the other side of the medal in actually her case, the desire also potentially to wanting to be victim for the sake of alleviating our pain, is the self-conscious design of actually wanting to thinking that her own condemnation and death would atone for her past sins. Like I said, this is not too dissimilar to what Ellie goes through towards the end of this one onward in Xenogears. So again, I really just think people are not really seeing the bigger picture, or at least if they want to not like the character, they're just doing it potentially in a superficial kind of manner. But again, if you still understand this and still don't think that the spell is being developed as it should be, I understand that. Just do that while knowing the information. That's what I mean. When it comes to the twist about Darklaw, I agree that it's a bit undercooked. It really feels like more stuff that should have been done, but they cut away.
I would have rather the twist had been that she was the cat.
Yeah, again, it would have been logical. And again, this leads also to the other bit that I haven't mentioned yet, how some characters are more favored towards other. And I mean, while Layton still in part of the shore in regards to Phoenix is present, the biggest culprit is Maya. Thank God they nailed Maya's characterization to a T, because if they haven't, she would have been just a complete, basically, weight that Phoenix would have had to drag around. The only reason why it's not so, because she's just manages to be entertaining and perfectly in character, but I have failed to see any potential good justification of why she doesn't use any of her powers, why Phoenix doesn't have his fucking Nakatama, or even so, if they don't even bother to actually say, oh, maybe this is Phoenix and Maya right after the end of Case 2, where she doesn't know how to control her power and Phoenix doesn't have Magneton, because they reference stuff from Justice for All and Trials and Tribulations. So, if you want to actually have the cake and eat it too, you have to still bake it.
It really... That's my biggest issue with the whole insistence that there's no magic here, because I'm convinced that is the main reason that they try and tiptoe around Maya being a spirit medium or the Magatama, because...
Again, as we mentioned, it really feels a missed opportunity that her spirit medium was not seen as necromancy and people actually wanted to put her on trial because of that. I mean, it's still logical what they did with the case where it's her being accused, so I don't have a complaint on there, but... Again, missed opportunity, and it really is a testament to how much of a mess this crossover is. But again, thank goodness that she manages to be in character, and as such, she still feels entertaining whenever she has to, think of her own or battle off to the other characters. As also Pedro noted, you get a couple of moments where Layton does feel a bit out of character, where he feels, again, Takumi just decided to flanderize him a bit, either being, for the sake of comedy, either being, hungry, obsessed by puzzles, or potentially being very rude to the people around him. But I get the idea it's more of a being in good fun kind of spirit rather than being a genuine mistake on a writing level. So again, considering I genuinely enjoyed also that, I don't mind it too much. But I can tell that the difference is actually felt. I don't think there's much else to say. Like I said, the favorite trial mentioned, I guess when it comes to the NPCs that testify, I guess my favorite would be...
For me, it's the 10 Knights.
Yeah, the Vigilantes.
Yeah.
I think, that's a good point. The Vigilantes, like I've said, they are basically the highlight of the first half of the trial. And again, I look forward to see if this gimmick is replicated effectively in the Great Ace Attorney. Not to mention, again, as another thing to mention for the gameplay. Yeah, I didn't talk about this actually for the gameplay because I do believe there's a difference. Okay, I get the idea that they wanted to make this game potentially more accessible to Ace Attorney fans who have no idea what Layton games are, but I do really feel as if a lot of the Layton's, trademark when it came to puzzles are not present here. Like, they removed the fact that you need to solve a certain code of puzzle to move forward. The total number of puzzles is actually not that much. And the overall difficulty is severely toned down. Not necessarily for the worst, because as Jovah noticed, there are also still a lot of, difficult puzzles to be found in the game. But you can tell the difference. And this is reflected also in the Ace Attorney section. A lot of time, there are a lot of less, red herrings, a lot of less dickish moments potentially, and I still don't understand why they felt the need to bring back the exclamation points instead of the health bar, because like I said, the health bar is the perfect catalyst to convey the tenseness of the situation, having the one-hit kill potentially depending on your doom, or each punishment being potentially more severe than another.
I get the feeling they went for the let's make it a nostalgic throwback to the first Ace Attorney game they went a bit overboard with it. Not everything needs to come back from that game.
Which wouldn't surprise me, because these were also the years around, well, at this point they already did, but this was not too far off of where Mega Man 9 and 10 were released, which were the pinnacle of let's put outdated gameplay mechanic for nostalgia's sake.
I feel like it was fine for Mega Man 9, even though they got rid of some of the moves.
Is just mind-boggling, if you ask me.
It was. Like, I mean, I can get maybe going back to some of the styles of it, but going completely back to Mega Man 2 style, that was off. And then doing it again for 10, I'm just glad that we're apparently back to doing stuff with 11.
I already mentioned anything I needed about Barnum being put on a bus towards the end.
So what exactly is your favorite court case? You haven't actually said which one that is.
I guess the third one, the Golden Turnabout overall. Well, it still has some problems with it. It's definitely the more enjoyable. Like I said, I don't really have a problem overall with the trials in the game, and the problems that they do have are more local and attached to maybe a bigger picture rather than being the trials of their own. So again, like I said also, this is not to me the lowest point of neither franchise. Apollo Justice is a much of a slog, and with any shred of enjoyment, even in the minimal cases where they could be present. Like, I cannot beginning to tell how happy I am I don't have to either play or get to that game ever again, because god damn. And this is also why I don't have too much of a high potential risk of expectation when it comes to games 5 and 6, because whatever they do, it will be better than Apollo Justice.
Oh, definitely.
Let me put it like this. Nowadays, the fan base have eased on even 5 and 6. Like, they have their issues with them, but the only game people sometimes weigh as potentially being as flawed as Ace Attorney 4 is Ace Attorney Investigations 1. Investigations 2 picks up the slack very much
I was
so
mostly
anyway.
talking about the mainline stuff, but sure. I still also had to see the greatest attorney for myself. Personal note that I could potentially end on as well. Like, again, this was, if I recall correctly, the last major game that was translated, but when it comes to the Ace Attorney stuff, this was actually translated in my country's language. Ever since, everything that came right after it, Apollo Justice, Dual Destinies, the investigation stuff, and even nowadays with the collections, both the Greatest Attorney and Normal Trilogy, for some reason Capcom decided to cut a couple of corners and localize it only in French and German when it comes to European languages outside of English. And I don't really...
Believe it or not, they started doing that whole stupid cut thing with the investigations game.
I really don't understand why, especially because Ghost Trick is getting localized, so... I don't know what's wrong with this. Again,
okay.
When some people have mentioned it's because the translation in Europe were actually done by Nintendo of Europe, apparently.
Well, the original release of Ghost Trick already had the multi-5 thing, so all they're doing is copy-pasting things.
Well, so did the Ace Attorney games, but they did not put it there. Some people suggested
right.
Because some translations were a bit outdated, but God, it will still be better than nothing in the world of, in Ben Judd. But
go on, Theo, go on.
No, again, I don't understand why they did that. It's not really a deal breaker for me because, as my present test, I don't really have a problem with the English language. It's kind of still saddens me a bit that some stuff gets chosen over others, as we tend to be. But that's what fan translations are for anyway. So again, it's a good thing. People do not get discouraged by this. But anyway, I think that's pretty much sums it up. I don't think I probably still forgot something anyway as it goes along with this. But again, that's the crossover in a nutshell. It could have been so much better. A lot of those stuff is really potentially just bad, or at the very least disappointing. But I wouldn't say that I wasted my time.
All right.
Pedro?
Okay.
Pedro.
I'm not going to go into the story all over again because I feel like we've been over this like a million times throughout this entire playthrough and even in these final thoughts at this point. So the story is incredibly flawed, but I will argue there's still a lot of great stuff in here. I had fun. They got the characters right, writing-wise. I mean, aside from like Theo said, and yes, I'm going to bring this again. Yeah, I get the feeling Takumi a bit like Takumi got a bit carried away when writing Layton sometimes. But it's nothing that destroys anything. It's just the occasional odd moment here and there, so whatever. That being said, it's a combination of outside interference, for all the reasons involving KG and Infinity we already talked about, lack of planning, getting carried away with things, and all that good stuff that we've talked about over and over by this point. Aside from that, the puzzles are great. They do a good job. Like, I personally don't have a problem with the more lenient difficulty. Like Theo said, they probably wanted to make sure Ace Attorney fans wouldn't have too much trouble going through these. And by that I mean Ace Attorney fans who haven't played Layton. I mean, whatever, fine. That's I still think the puzzles are fine for what they are. That's the thing. So yeah, they're easier, but whatever. There's a genuinely good reason for making them easier, so fine, no problem there. But like everybody else said, the presentation is by far the best aspect of this. The graphics look great and everything. The music is a masterpiece. Say it with me now. Tomohito Nishihira does not miss. This guy has been making constantly brilliant music for 25 plus years at this point. And I have yet to hear a bad track from him. And remember, I've been doing this dance with him since Dark Cloud in 2001. So I would know. Again, if this guy's doing the music, it's basically a guarantee at this point. At this point, I am genuinely convinced this man can do no wrong. It's been 25 plus years. If he has a bad track in him, I have yet to hear it. And same thing for Kitagawa. Kitagawa also brings his A game here. I actually do prefer his work.
This was his debut as lead composer, wasn't it?
Yes, this was his first time composing for Takumi, I think. So yeah. So good job. And like I said, I'm really I'm really glad that a lot of the music in this game is a throwback to the first Ace Attorney soundtrack, since the first Ace Attorney soundtrack is still my favorite of the mainline Ace Attorney games. So kudos to that. Yeah. When it comes to there's only one. And this is not a complaint, by the way. This is just an odd thing that I noticed. Like Dweb said, most of the much like most of the fan servicey tracks for Ace Attorney come from Ace Attorney 1, most of the fan servicey all of the Ace Attorney, all of the Layton fan servicey tracks are taken specifically from Last Spectre, which, don't get me wrong, I love that soundtrack, but considering this game is trying to be a throwback to the OG trilogy of both franchises, just much like Ace Attorney, much like what wouldn't make more sense for the fan servicey tracks to be taken from various points in the original trilogy? I mean,
the main theory we had was that because originally this game was supposed to take place during the prequel trilogy of Layton, and our guess was that at the time that was what they were composing the Layton referential tracks to. That's my best guess. Otherwise, Nishihiro-san really likes that soundtrack.
Well, don't get me wrong, I don't blame him. It's just again, this is not a problem, or if any, not even close. It's just an odd thing that I noticed.
It's an eyebrow raiser.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's great music regardless, so it's not like it matters. Point is, the soundtrack is a fucking masterpiece. That's basically it. If there's one thing in this game that definitely lived up to the expectations, it's the music. Yeah, aside from that, the puzzles, I've already talked about the puzzles and the story and the characters. The characters are, for the most part, really okay. The new characters specifically, I already talked about the returning ones from the franchises. The new characters made for this game, most of them are good, but yeah, there's a lot of problems involving the way they handle the main characters, like Espella, Eve, and the storyteller. So quite a lot of problems there. Again, the flawed story doesn't help, so that's the basic gist of it. It's like everybody else said, it is frustrating that because you can tell this game had so much chopped out of it, because you can so tell. It's kind of like what happened with the recent, without spoiling any things for anybody. It's kind of like what happened with the finale of Megaton Musashi, where because of what happened with outside interference, of outside problems with OLM and the pandemic having a really hard on the production of a lot of animes, and OLM being especially hit hard, a lot of the stuff that was planned for Musashi unfortunately had to be cut down. God, this is such a bad luck with these things, isn't it?
I know, right?
I can tell you, however, that Megaton Musashi manages to overcome its weaknesses a lot better than this, at least. It doesn't come out unscathed, but it still manages to hit that finish line. It with a lot of bruises, but it hit the finish line still. So the point is, yeah, like Shiroi said, wasted potential, and yeah, that's basically it. Jovah closes us out.
At the end of the day, I am glad that not only did we commentate on this game, but I actually am glad that we needed to do a re-recording for the whole thing, because I'll admit the first time we recorded this, I definitely had ended on the idea that this game as a whole was bad because of bad ending. And re-looking at it, no, I cannot say that this game as a whole is bad. It's more about where it's almost perfect, but it has a massive blemish that definitely tarnishes it and keeps it from being perfect. And this isn't even to say that it was really that perfect, but honestly, if it weren't for the problems with the ending, this would be overall a good, solid narrative the whole way. And like I said, in a lot of ways, the build-up to it, it really still is. So, yeah. I guess let's start at the beginning with this stuff here. The story, overall, while I would have preferred we did a lot of the stuff from the original drafts, I do feel like the story does come up with a good reason for Phoenix and Layton to cross paths and eventually work together. There's also a lot of really good stuff in it. The prologues each are a good way to get you attuned with each series if you're not familiar with them. That's good. The main bulk of the story takes place in Labyrinthia, and again, like I've said, these are the most fleshed out NPCs in anything Layton-wise have been, because normally, with NPCs in Layton, it's normally just, give them a puzzle, solve a puzzle, maybe get some funny interaction, do that once or twice, and that's more or less it to them. Here, you can meet people who not only give you puzzles, but you can meet them both in and out of the courtroom, flesh out their characters, and see how they interact with, or how stuff will help you out in regards later here. Again, this is not necessarily stuff that we've never seen from Layton, but this is definitely the most fleshed out.
I will argue...
Which makes the revelation that the town was fake really hurt, but one thing that has lifted my thing on this is like, well, I've come to realize... despite the fact that the town was fake, I do feel like the bonds that we made were real, and that is something that people will hold. And yes, I do realize how much of a corny anime line that is.
The real crossover was the friends we've made along the way.
The witnesses we objected
Stop.
along the way.
The people we burnt along the way.
Yes.
Yeah, and one I've mentioned before, but I didn't hear mentioned during the final thoughts. One of my favorite bits is seeing a lot of the implications with stuff. How Phoenix and Maya specifically mentions to Luke how she and Phoenix now have to really bear to terms with the fact that a lot of their memories were fake. But to them, the bonds that they've made with Espella and Aunt Patty still feel very real, which I feel does give them very good motivation to want to help Espella, regardless of our character may be here or there.
Yeah, this is something that Hino would revisit in Megaton Musashi as well. Just to address your point, I will argue that the more slice of lifey pacing and structure of the Lady Layton era, both game and anime, do also allow for quite a lot of the NPCs to return from case to case, and as a result get a lot more screen time and development. There's a case in particular where Kat is in trouble, and the people that she's helped along the way help her now. So I will argue the Lady Layton era stuff did. This also is reflected in the anime, where we see characters return from previous episodes, and they're now at a different phase in their life compared to how the first time we saw them. So the Lady Layton era actually does do a good job of that.
The anime does have an advantage, and I haven't seen the game in full, but I'll reiterate and say up to this point in time when the game came out. Then
Sure. Go ahead.
But yeah, no, like I said, very good stuff there with how they'll have to come to terms with these memories, but it gives Phoenix and Maya the motivation that does explain why they go to the ends of the earth to help Espella this much here and there. It's interesting seeing how the town works and, how it functions with puzzles, seeing the lighter side of it, but then the darker side of it with the courtroom trials, and also seeing the much more run-down side of things when we're forced to go to the rogue side of the village, where also, again, people that we've helped in turn do come back into the plot later. Given how this game influenced Great Ace Attorney's development, maybe this game also influenced Lady Layton's, now that you mention how they do all that stuff with the NPCs in the game, Pedro.
Well, remember, Lady Layton is the one Layton game that takes place entirely and uniquely in just one... at least until New World of Steam, at least. That takes place entirely in just one spot since Curious Village. Remember, in Curious Village, the NPCs are noticeably more fleshed out than the later games because, again, you spend the entire game in Saint Mystère. In Layton's Mystery Journey, you spend the entirety of the game in London, and as a result, you keep running into the same NPCs again and again and again. You get to see how they are compared to 2 cases ago and shit like that. So that effect does come across.
As for the character designs, I do actually think they did a great job making the character designs mesh well. Like, it never seemed uncanny to me seeing Layton-esque characters side by side with Ace Attorney-esque characters. This is most prominently shown in stuff like the Witch Trials, wherein you got Wordsmith, who definitely looks more Layton-esque, next to someone like Kira, who looks more Ace Attorney-esque, or a literal fusion of the two, as some might say. And then there's Mary, who... I'm going to say is Layton-esque, my point is that the styles were mixed just enough well that you can definitely tell which series each character would come from. In fact, they even do a little extra bit and give them the special character bloop sounds that fit either the Ace Attorney style or Layton style, which is, again, another detail I really do like. Like one thing we've gotten to notice on this redo of our playthrough is just how much detail there is in the crossover, which makes the points where it has its failings just hurt all the more. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't white knight for Shu Takumi. Do I still think he's the best writer for Ace Attorney? Yes. But he does have his flaws. What I will say that I've come to notice is his biggest blunders seem to be cases that were outside of his control. Like I mentioned, Justice for All, he ended up having to rush that. And yet, get this, ironically, despite how much Tournament Big Top is hated over in the West, over in Japan, that's one of the most popular cases. So much so that is the reason we will be seeing a return of a few characters in the future, here and there. But Apollo Justice, like we said before, he had a good story going with that, but then executive mandates came in that warped that story to no end. And finally, we come to this game, wherein, of course, Inafune up and leaving, and Capcom being mid-2010s Capcom really threw a wrench into things. Heck, one could kind of argue similar stuff happened with the Greatest Attorney stuff. While the Greatest Attorney duology has turned out to be great, and the first installment isn't even bad, you probably have heard the complaints that the first game really feels like it's just a lead into the second game, and that is because Capcom forced Takumi to split that story right down, despite it clearly hurting the game.
Yeah, and Chronicles is not like a change. It's just the two games packaged into a collection. You can literally choose between both games at the when you boot it up. So it's just the two games as they were.
If I recall correctly, there is an option to have them literally conjoined.
No.
As soon as you finish the first game, you immediately go into the.
I can tell you no. When you boot up the collection, at least on Switch, I don't know if it's different for the other versions. On Switch, when you boot it up, it asks you which game you want to play: Greatest Attorney 1 or Greatest Attorney 2. You just pick which game you want to play. It's a collection. It's literally a collection. But the thing is, everybody, you have to understand the first Greatest Attorney game was originally released as a full price 3DS game, and it ends with nah, we're not going to tell you things yet. I guess I'll just have to buy the second game thing. So I can understand why Japanese Ace Attorney fans were incredibly angry at that ending. To be honest with you.
Again, the sheer irony that despite the West having to wait for it, we arguably got Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, as I pretty much call the duology, in its best form.
Not to mention Capcom forcing Takumi to turn this entire story into two full-content, full-priced games, forced him to needlessly stretch out certain things and harm the pacing of the game.
Now, whereas with the second game, even with what's technically filler, it still is extremely fun, but you can still tell what's filler here and there. Regardless, though, back to my main point, I do feel that if Capcom really do want Takumi to come back to the main series, let the man cook properly.
Yeah.
Just, okay, look, if he's doing something that's off, sure, then restrain him, but otherwise, it seems like Takumi really does function best when he has less stuff interfering with his
obviously.
vision.
And please, for the love of God, let the man take a break once in a while from Ace Attorney.
I wonder if he has been getting a break from Ace Attorney, because it is... Well, okay, granted, unless he did something new for the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, the last thing Ace Attorney style he's done that's been released was Great Ace Attorney 2, and that was back in 2017.
I get that, Jovah, but what new games has he made since Great Ace Attorney 2, though?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I wonder if he has been taking a break, or, God help me, rumors of him working on Ace Attorney 7 are true. Has he been working on that game all these years?
Yamazaki left the company, so we know he's not working on that. So I'm guessing Capcom probably went to Takumi. Hey, could you do a great Ace Attorney 7? Ace Attorney 7. Okay, thanks. That's cool, but please don't put him in an Ace Attorney dungeon where he's forced to just do that, because that was that's what caused problems to begin with. Let him make an Ace Attorney game, then something else, then Ace Attorney game, then something else.
Holding Ghost Trick hostage probably did not help things with Ace Attorney 4.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to my main point here is like, no, Takumi is on point for the most part with the writing in this game. And yeah, I'm going to agree with Tio that despite me thinking that the fourth trial is the worst case of the game, that is strictly only because of the last 2 chapters, because up until that point, it's actually a pretty great trial. Going again with bouts of the presentation, the witch trials are definitely the highest points of the game, for obvious reasons. Like, in an Ace Attorney typical bout, of course the trials are where the main action happens, but in here, we also get to see probably the best case of the elements of Layton and Phoenix Wright crossing over with one another, and how it brings an alteration to the trial format and whatnot. The new mechanics brought in, and the return of the old, mixed and maxed into a new style, which is very fun to play with, and would later get built up on in, of course, Great Ace Attorney, which is more or less the spiritual successor to this game, let's be honest.
Yes, it is. It's even using it has the same art director, it has a lot of the same mechanics, it's pretty much like done by the Takumi team.
This comes in culmination with the final trial, presentation-wise, which has fantastic ones. You have a custom-set trial court, you have the atmosphere and music all changed for the final trial, and you have some of the most biggest battles whatsoever. It is great for the presentation, which again makes the bit where everything just slows to a crawl and becomes one big therapy session all the more jarring because it takes away from mistakes. But I'll get more into that when I'm talking about the story as a whole. Mainly I'm talking about the story presentation. So yeah, no, the story presentation is definitely great and on point. Great use of the characters and plot points, especially with what I mentioned prior. Like I said, the main issues I start to have with the story crop up around the halfway point when you realize that Kira's alive and you're essentially going into the Eldritch Woods. Not helped by the fact that the Shades aren't the most compelling of the characters. Like, I get it, they're kind of geared that way. I do feel like we could have tried to sum up some of them better, like maybe differentiate them somewhat more. Again, maybe that was the point, and literally being referred to as just a nameless bout is a fate considered worse than death, and why they want to so desperately return to the village. But yeah. But as for the deeper story bits, let's go into some of the characters. Well, the main ones at play. First, there's Barnum. He has a great character arc that does not get properly finished, unfortunately. Unless we're to assume that in his dungeon cell, he finally came to the realization of it all, and, well, I guess he'll get to settle down with Eve, as the implications seem to be. Honestly, pretty much 90% of the problems I have with the plot all tie to how they either get wrapped up terribly or not at all in the ending, because a lot of what is brought up is interesting. The first turnabout is a good case that really gets the mystery pumping, and you start to wonder, hey, how did this happen? It must have been magic. Same, of course, with Layton's prologue and whatnot. By the second trial, that's essentially a second tutorial case, but one that does have a good culmination. Again, I find Kira to be a really fun villain. He might be a bit obvious to some. The DLC even lampshades this a bit, but all the same, she's a good opponent. My favorite case, of course, is the Golden Court, because first, Jean Guerrero to me is the best handled original character in this game. she has her arc, and she even gets to see it through. Like, she essentially gets community service, the first time a witch has ever not gotten burned for being a witch, and it's all thanks to Phoenix and company changing the system. Which, as much as I love that, I again have to go with how the ending mucks that up. Like, had we just gone with the town being real, imagine how cool it would have been that Phoenix and company were changing the system, not immediately, but ever so slightly. But again, everything's pretty much all wiped when it turns out the town is fake. And speaking of which, yeah, that last case. Like I mentioned, the build-up to it is fantastic. Like, look, if it weren't for that ending, the 4 case might have actually been my favorite. The battle with Darklaw starts off seeming like you can't win, but then gets more satisfying as Phoenix blows back against her more and more until she is essentially backed into her corner, probably keeping a stoic face to hide the "oh crap, my plans are coming apart" bout. I mean, she tries to salvage it by claiming that, "oh, everything went according to my plan," even though she later admits that Phoenix was not a part of that plan, so yeah. That being said, the big standout, the courtroom battle with the vigilantes. One of the biggest number, in fact, might still to this day be the biggest number of witnesses you'll ever take. It's so powerful that it tanks the game's frame rate to render that many models there. But dear lord, is it worth it? Especially when you get that giant cluster fudge of a breakdown where all of them just splurts onto the desk. But like Tio said, this is one of the clear signs that Phoenix is indeed an ace attorney. So, of course, as soon as Layton shows up and the versus begins, this is when things go to crap.
Let's bully Phoenix.
Yeah, that too. Look.
Phoenix who?
So, let me just reiterate here. I don't consider this ending, and by that I mean the final court case as a whole, to be the worst thing Ace Attorney has done. What I do consider is the last 2 chapters, which essentially make up the ending of the main story, to be the worst thing Ace Attorney has done. Yes, I consider it worse than Turnabout Big Top, Turnabout Ballad, any of the infamous cases in the 3DS games, and yes, even more than Turnabout Ablaze from Investigations, because whatever issues you have with those cases, this one takes them and multiplies them to 11. Like I said, the biggest problem being that it commits the one cardinal sin that no other case has done, making the Ace Attorney characters and the lawyering more or less useless to the whole bout. Literally during the courtroom. Like, here's my take. If you really, really had to have the whole town is safe thing, maybe have it be after we prove Dispella innocent. Like, you know, say, yay, she's innocent, and then we go off and then solve all this stuff, and then the storyteller says, okay, I'll free everyone from mind control, but they'll still remember you, so it won't feel like the thing was pointless. But my god, if the first time I ever played this game, that ending hurt me. Like, and I don't mean like just, oh, I could shake it off, like, no. That ending felt like a betrayal to something that I really did love and hold near dear. It has, in a way, kind of traumatized me to this game. Like, not to a point like where, oh, it's like, you know, absolutely wrecked my mind, but I did not come back to this game until it was time to record this for the channel. And then I would come back to it years later. I am happy to say, though, that I can see the value in it. I think that part of my hatred of the game at the time was emphasized by the fact that there are no chapter selects. Like, if you want to re-experience this game, you gotta do it by every little slow pace of that. Like, you gotta start from the very beginning, no bits or bat. Which is weird when you compare it to Ace Attorney as of now, which literally has now chapter selects that can take you to any point you want to re-experience in a game. Like, say you've played an Ace Attorney game already? Well, now you can literally have the game take you back to one of the trial sections if you don't want to redo the investigation bits. And the lack of the B skip button, which I mentioned as early as, like, part 4 as well, was a jarring miss. Like, and look, now that I've come to terms with it, I can get why that really did emphasize my dislike of it, because, again, if I want to replay this game, I'll have to replay it knowing that ending comes, and, it just does not sit as well with me. Now, one could say you could just end before you get to the ending there, but...
Jovah, that's the logic people try to apply to Prince of Persia 2008.
No, it just doesn't work, because then what are you left with? Just the characters don't solve it, essentially. That being said, what helps this game are the DLC episodes that come after. They don't explain away all the problems. Like, I am still not buying that with this system they were able to pull off all the magic without people noticing. Like, look, what they're describing sounds like pretty much a gigantic Broadway show. But here's the thing. A Broadway show is contained to a theater. This is literally an entire island. And look, maybe if they were consistent about stuff here and there, that would be fine. But keep in mind, Barnum actually does remember getting knocked out by the Great Witch in this encounter. Why does nobody else remember encounters of getting knocked out, or even noticing a passage in time if supposedly they get knocked out whenever magic needs to happen? And furthermore, they seriously have shades just following around the witches, knowing when she's going to cast this or that. So, what was up with Grail's bout here? Now think about this. Grail was planning to run away, essentially, after strangling Belduke. But the storyteller couldn't have known she was planning to do that because, well, as far as he knew, Belduke was looking after Grail. Like, unless they had a shade with her, how would she have done the Godor spell which led her to believe she killed Belduke in the first place? And not only that, they seriously had her believe that she killed her goat instead of, you know, believe. Or they couldn't have just altered her memory a bit to suggest that, oh, she ended up accidentally touching the tree. And I'm sorry, no, if they can make a golden Layton statue on the fly, they can make a golden tree.
I would never do that on a golden tree.
Again, I really do feel like, and the reason I really do feel like making it non-magical was one thing, but the way they go about explaining it just shoots so many holes into the plot in hindsight. Now, again, the main reason I don't consider this the worst thing Layton has done is because this is more or less par the course for Layton. Like I've said, it's a thing I don't care for in the series, but it's a point where I realized it was more or less probably not going to change in that regard, wherein, despite clearly having stuff that would probably be easier to explain with magic, they come up with incredibly complex and needlessly convoluted bouts of how, oh, it totally wasn't magic, it was this or that. Never mind the fact that they did relent that apparently there is a mystical pool that kept what they think is a dinosaur in Last Spectre alive for all those years, and can literally cure any illness or disease and whatnot, and the fact that they have been brought back to life from the dead, but I digress. Honestly, this is kind of part of the course for Layton. Which is why, again, I've mellowed on the ending in some regards. It still hurts a lot, but I'm able to enjoy the game overall, and like I said, this is thanks also to the DLC, which takes place after. In most cases, it would just be fourth wall breaking stuff, but in this crossover sense, it is technically canon to the main story of the crossover, wherein it takes place a year after. And we get interactions with characters, seeing how they are afterwards here and there. It is nice that we at least do get something of a close to most of these characters. Now, the main issue is, DLC-wise, we kind of skip the big climax, which is the Miss Bezella pageant and the party at the end. That said, we do get a nice ending goodbye with the last episode. And also a peek into how kind of messy the development was. Like, I do wonder, Pedro, if that bit was Takumi and Hino venting as best as they legally could without breaking NDA.
Probably. Yeah. Well, remember, Takumi... Well, remember, there's a moment in Apologist that also kind of feels like that. So... I'm starting to get the feeling.
Okay. What was that bit in Apologistus?
When they're talking about, it's in the Phoenix losing his badge trial, where they're talking about
right, yeah.
So I get the feeling probably it's Takumi venting in both cases.
Mm-hmm. But hey, Hina was able to forgive Inafune and even hire him. God bless his soul. So I can forgive this ending for what it put me through back then. And look, I'm gonna say this crossover, it's good. If you haven't played it, play it. I do recommend it. Just know that ending is gonna be a test of patience. But if you can stomach that, I do think everything else is still worth it.
Yep.
So with that, I do declare that our playthrough of Phoenix Wright and Professor Layton, the crossover, can finally come.
And yes, so there you go. It took us a long time, everybody, but our promise at the end of our Miracle Mask run has finally been fulfilled. We finally did this bloody crossover, and like we promised, also at the end of Miracle Mask, you know what comes next? The final Herschel Layton, well, the original final saga game, Azure Legacy. So after all these years, yes, we're finally going to tackle that next. So
see you then for that.
See ya.
See ya.
Yep.